Ok, perfetto, grazie. Okay, we can start. I want to welcome all participants to this 8th International Astril Conference as President of Astril and the Deputy Director of Roma Trade Department of Economics, which I thank for its organizational support. I also thank them for their sponsorship, the Italian National Institute for the Analysis of Public Policies, the Italian Association of Labor Economists, the European Association of Evolutionary Political Economy, and the Certification Commission of Roma Trade University. Finally, I would like to thank Professor Kurz of Graz Schumpeter Center and Professor Saraceno of Sciences Po for accepting our invitation to give the keynote speeches at our conference. This year, the conference focuses on the impact of technological progress on labor market outcomes and income distribution. As is known, the recent rise and spread of artificial intelligence have added a new dimension to this topic, given the changes it brings to the organization of production and the role of workers in the labor process. The proliferation of AI has created vast opportunities for automation and substituting human labor. At the same time, the demand for new skills has sparked a critical need to rethink workforce training and education. These changes are reshaping both labor demand and labor supply, with significant implications for policy decisions, not only in terms of industrial policies, but also in the realms of welfare, income distribution, and education. The effects of robust innovation can in fact be asymmetric and may lead to labor market segmentation and marginalization. While new employment opportunities may emerge, others become obsolete, resulting in adverse consequences for individuals' incomes and social sustainability. It is also possible that these processes led to an increase in the amount of unemployment and underemployment of labor that persist over time, according to the kind of technical progress, the sectors involved, and their geographical localization. As a result, a comprehensive policy approach encompassing active labor market policies, minimum wage regulations, unemployment benefits, and social welfare provisions ought to be implemented. And in the spirit of what was suggested at the time by Keynes and Leontiev, the increase in the surplus product determined by technical progress ought to go to real wages and reducing working time, avoiding any further rise in personal and functional income inequality of the kind observed in the last decades in the main advanced countries. It also calls for appropriate fiscal and monetary policies fueling aggregate demand, which in the European countries are hindered nowadays by fiscal regulations that enforce austerity and by the stringent monetary policy implemented by the European Central Bank. In this respect, how to reform the European institutional context and what monetary and fiscal policies should be implemented to improve the standard of living of European population are relevant issues, especially considering the social measures needed to face the structural changes determined by technical progress. The 8th International Astril Conference has brought together contributions in these fields on both theoretical and empirical grounds. We have received a large number of papers and have 8 special sessions and 15 parallel sessions with a total of 88 presentations. They concern mainly the determinants and kind of technical change, the structural changes in the labor market that they determine, but also macroeconomic issues and the reshaping of the welfare system and industrial relations. I must thank INAPP, the Italian Post-Keynesian Network, the DIGITECON and the Labor Law Groups, and the Structural Development Macroeconomics Research Group for their contribution in organizing the special sessions. I would also like to thank Davide Romagnello, Giacomo Sprenna, and Luigi Salvati for organizing the Young Scholar Initiative pre-conference held yesterday, in which we had several interesting presentations by young scholars and 2 lectures by Professor Toporowski of SOAS University and Professor Brondino of Catholic University of Milan. As regards the conference program, unfortunately, only one parallel session focuses on the specific issue of working time reduction. We tried to organize a plenary session on this issue without success, as planning on May, a specific Astril workshop on it, because we think that this is a fundamental measure to be introduced by law as in Spain recently, or by means of the process of collective bargaining. Thanks all for now. I don't want to take any more time away. Before the speech of Professor Saraceno, I would like to briefly give the floor to Dr. Forlani, President of INAPP, for his welcome address to the conference. Professor Valeria Costantini, head of our department, this morning cannot be attended the conference due to institutional commitments, and its welcome address has been substituted, let's say, by mine. So, Dr. Forlani.
Grazie. Thank you very much. Good morning, buongiorno a tutti. Grazie per l'invito e un ringraziamento alla Facoltà di Economia dell'Università Roma 3 per la collaborazione attiva durevole nel tempo. Tra l'altro ci ha regalato anche il mio precedente presidente dell'INAPP, che ho l'onore di aver ereditato, il professor Sebastiano Fatta, che ha portato dentro anche, diciamo così, l'approccio anche della tradizione culturale della vostra università nei lavori del nostro istituto. Quindi ho accolto con piacere l'invito di oggi di essere presente e di portare non solo il saluto e il ringraziamento del nostro istituto, ma anche l'onore che abbiamo di partecipare ai lavori di questo importante convegno in maniera attiva, cioè fornendo anche, diciamo, contributi sia personali, scientifici, sia, diciamo, di elaborazione in termini di ricerca già prodotti dall'istituto sul tema che è il tema dei temi delle economie sviluppate, come reggere 2 fenomeni strutturali, l'invecchiamento della popolazione con effetti sulla popolazione attiva che scontano l'esaurimento, diciamo così, del baby boom, cioè dividendo il baby boom sul mercato del lavoro, cioè una dinamica molto forte in Italia, tra l'altro, in termini di saldi negativi tra uscite dal mercato del lavoro e ingresso delle nuove corsi in uscita dai percorsi scolastici, che sarà un elemento caratterizzante dei prossimi 20 anni. Il secondo elemento strutturale con cui ci dovremo confrontare è l'effetto sul mismatch generato dalle nuove tecnologie, oltre che a fattori di tipo valoriale. C'è una complessità di problematiche che rendono difficile far coincidere la domanda e l'offerta di lavoro. In tutti i paesi sviluppati la domanda di competenze è superiore alla produzione interna. Quindi generando anche elementi di comparazione, di analisi comparative in termini di competitività dei singoli mercati del lavoro, in termini di attrazione delle risorse. Questo problema in Italia è particolarmente esposto. Abbiamo i problemi degli altri paesi, ma abbiamo un sottoutilizzo delle risorse umane superiore, cioè circa 8,5 punti di tasso di occupazione rispetto all'UE 27, equivalente a circa 3.200.000 posti di lavoro. Quindi un volume enorme di potenzialità disponibili, analizzabili anche in termini di perché siamo in queste condizioni. Abbiamo cercato nella presentazione dell'ultimo rapporto fatto alla Camera dei Deputati di individuare alcune delle cause, ivi compresa, diciamo così, la capacità di orientare in maniera produttiva la spesa pubblica, che motiva una parte rilevantissima del gap occupazionale che abbiamo, non solo dal punto di vista numerico, ma anche delle ricadute che sui giovani laureati, sul territorio, dell'equilibrio, diciamo, della crescita occupazionale e soprattutto sulle donne, perché l'influenza della spesa pubblica è stata determinante in tutti i paesi europei per la crescita dell'occupazione femminile nell'ambito dei servizi, soprattutto dei servizi orientati dalla domanda pubblica. La sfida quindi che abbiamo di fronte è molto complessa per il nostro paese. Le cause del mismatch peraltro hanno aumentato di circa 20 punti rispetto al 2019, che è un'enormità dal punto di vista quantitativo, dal punto di vista della difficoltà delle imprese, e che presenta al suo interno numerose sfaccettature che in maniera molto opportuna vengono analizzate nel corso di questo convegno. Il primo elemento che sottolineo con molto favore è l'approccio alla complessità. L'approccio alla complessità è necessario perché dobbiamo far fronte a fenomeni molto contraddittori che richiedono una capacità di analisi di come si forma la domanda, e pesa in particolare in Italia lo squilibrio territoriale, cioè il sottoutilizzo delle risorse, soprattutto la quota delle persone non attive, cioè quelle inattive che non cercano attivamente il lavoro, che comunque sono scoraggiate a farlo, per capirsi, è molto elevata e non è stata scalfita dalla dinamica occupazionale positiva che si è verificata negli ultimi anni. Quindi il fattore territoriale della formazione della domanda è ancora un problema rilevante nel nostro paese, nonostante la domanda sia superiore all'offerta di lavoro. E gli effetti migratori per compensare questo fenomeno sono squilibranti, cioè stanno svuotando aree interne del nostro paese. Quindi anche le soluzioni possono essere soluzioni problematiche che possono comportare anche una serie di aumenti di squilibri che possono diventare irreversibili in alcune aree territoriali, svuotando la popolazione giovane. Il risultato finale è l'impossibilità di determinare l'inversione di tendenza. Primo tema. Secondo tema è l'effetto contraddittorio dell'innovazione tecnologica. In molti settori la resilienza anche delle popolazioni anziane, che nel nostro paese è diventata la quota maggioritaria della popolazione attiva, unico paese in Europa, dove gli under 50 hanno superato la quota dei 35-49. La quota di 35-49 è strutturalmente la spina dorsale non solo del mercato del lavoro, ma anche delle comunità, cioè c'è dentro la quota delle persone che investono, fanno famiglia, fanno investimenti sul futuro, sia in termini personali, professionali, sia in termini di ruolo sociale. Quindi un aspetto molto delicato, l'interrogativo del nostro paese è: riusciremo a rimanere un paese benestante, perdendo popolazioni in età da lavoro, con una bassa capacità di utilizzo delle tecnologie, quindi l'alta risposta è aumentare la produttività pro capite per reggere anche il numero delle persone a carico in aumento. Riusciremo a dare una risposta a questo fenomeno? Questo è l'interrogativo. Parte delle risposte sono dentro l'analisi di questo convegno, che noi guarderemo con grande attenzione e non per motivi di stile. Lo si dice sempre questo, ma perché è necessario riposizionare tutta l'attività della ricerca in questa direzione, sapendo che sull'invecchiamento della popolazione attiva e sulla sostenibilità della non autosufficienza si giocheranno le politiche del nostro paese in termini di tenuta della nostra comunità nazionale, non solo di tenuta economica. Quindi il rafforzamento del pilastro produttivo avere la capacità di avere politiche in grado di rispondere alla complessità dei fenomeni che generano il mismatch e la sottovalutazione, la sottoutilizzo delle risorse umane che ereditiamo anche per problemi storici, la mancanza di politiche di genere adeguate sulla conciliazione, per fare un esempio, ovvero lo scollamento tra i percorsi scolastici formativi e l'ingresso, che devono essere affrontati in maniera radicale, ma che vengono complicati dai due fattori che hanno tassi di influenza sulle dinamiche largamente superiori alla capacità dell'offerta. Quindi per le nostre politiche del lavoro si pongono due problemi. Primo, l'adeguamento delle governance. Sono troppo pochi gli attori che concorrono a offrire risposte a queste tendenze. C'è una carenza di innovazione sociale che deriva da una carenza di analisi dei fenomeni, cioè il rifiuto di affrontarli per la complessità che li caratterizza. Cioè l'idea che possa essere lo Stato con le norme o con i trasferimenti a risolvere il problema. È un'idea sbagliata, non che non sia necessaria, certo che è necessaria, ma è efficace nella misura in cui il concorso di tutti gli attori, cioè la governance, è soddisfacente in termini di contributo all'innovazione sociale, in grado di dare risposte a quella tecnologica e orientarla in maniera positiva. Il secondo tema è la capacità di analizzare l'efficacia delle misure e della spesa, problema molto esposto in Italia. I trasferimenti dello Stato per sostegno ai redditi sono stati enormi negli ultimi 15 anni e i risultati non adeguati. Questo è visibile da tutta parte, tutti gli indicatori. Quindi la capacità di analizzare l'efficacia delle misure della spesa diventa un complemento necessario. Queste sono due missioni che noi come INAPP vogliamo ereditare nel nostro piano strategico, ma non siamo in grado da soli di affrontare problemi di questo genere. Abbiamo bisogno di una grande apertura con la comunità scientifica, con le università, per costruire proprio un approccio culturale, prima ancora che sostanziale, cioè come tradurlo poi nelle politiche, per riorientare l'uso delle risorse e porre al centro dell'attenzione la capacità di massimizzare le risorse che abbiamo a disposizione, perché sottoutilizziamo risparmio, sottoutilizziamo tecnologie, sottoutilizziamo risorse umane. Quindi la prospettiva è positiva, non è una prospettiva di sacrifici. La prospettiva è costruire le condizioni per rimanere un paese ad alto tasso di invecchiamento, ma comunque benessente, utilizzando al meglio le nostre risorse. Grazie per i contributi che saprete dare a questo tipo di lavoro.
Thank you to Dr. Forlani, President of INAPP, and now the speech of Professor Saraceno. Yes, entitled Technical Progress, Labor Market and the Transitions, the Return of the Regulatory State. There is no need to spend many words to introduce Professor Saraceno. He is Deputy Director of the Research Center in Economics of Sciences Po, and he is actively involved in the institutional dialogue on macroeconomic policy in the European Union. His main research interests include the relationship between inequality and macroeconomic performance, European macroeconomic policies, and the interaction between structural reforms, fiscal and monetary policies. And on these issues, he published several papers and also books.
Grazie molto Sergio, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. My interactions with this department and this conference are becoming a routine, which is very much something that I like and I appreciate. So I thank you twice for the invitation. when discussing with Sergio what I could do to contribute to this conference, we agreed that I would try to give you quite a wide-ranging and somewhat superficial, but I hope also stimulating view of where we are today on the debate of on the return of the state in the economy. And so what I will try to do is to fine-tune this discussion about the new debate we are having, even within, I would say, mainstream economics, on the interaction between state and market to obtain socially desirable outcomes after the obvious conclusion we got from the global financial crisis that the former excessive reliance on markets was not leading to any, I would say, any decent outcome. So this is more or less what I will try to do. So I will first of all focus a little bit on something. Given the crowd, I will be very quick. It will be more a reminder that something you don't know, of course, on the return of industrial policy in the recent economic debate. I will then discuss this return of the state, that is not just the return of the state in the standard classic Keynesian role of stabilizing the economy. It is much more. It needs to regulate. It needs to enable market, but also to create markets somehow. This is, if you want, the Mazzucato perspective that has now become a real consensus within policy circles. And then in the last part, focus on this issue of regulation. So the fact that the state can not only just be investing in the economy and in enhancing the working of market, but also needs to regulate them. And there I will draw a little bit on recent work by the latest Nobel Prize in Economics, Acemoglu, that in my opinion, in his most recent work has given us some quite interesting insight. All of that in 45, 50 minutes. So let me proceed. So let me be very quick on something that I repeat in this room. There is no need to go into the details. So we have had along the 20th century within the macroeconomics debate two very two very, I would say, paradigmatic approaches. Okay, the first is the one that was developed before Keynes by the neoclassical theory, that of course is centered on the idea that you have markets that individuals that interact through only one institution, which is the market, and these interactions through this institution with a few conditions that are quite easy to satisfy, at least on paper. These interaction yields outcomes that are both efficient and decentralized, so they don't need any intervention of external institutions. Within this framework, of course, the only role for the government, for the state, is to make sure that the conditions for these virtuous interaction of markets are in place, and that is done with what today we call the structural reforms. The crisis of 1929 introduces a quite different view about the interaction between the state of the market. Always, here we are. We are in a place where Carignani has been working a lot. So, always within the neoclassical tradition, the Keynesian theory reaches quite a different thing. So Keynes does not challenge the individual methodological individualism. Keynes does not challenge the optimization of agents. He just introduces uncertainty, and the introduction of radical uncertainty makes it rational for individuals to hoard and to withdraw something from the circuit, income expenditure, and that at the aggregate level yields a a lack of aggregate demand, and this lack of aggregate demand, of course, calls for macroeconomic stabilization in the form of fiscal, monetary, and more importantly, fiscal policy. These, I repeat, within the neoclassical, I mean, Keynes is basically working within the neoclassical theoretical premises, and the result is nevertheless that an important role for the state is designed by Keynes, and that leads to the famous 30 glorieuses, as they say in France, the famous 30 years of very heavy interventionism of the state in the economy through a number of instruments that go from regulation to public investment to macroeconomic stabilization, the very famous fine tuning. So these two views have been dominating, if you want, and we've been going back and forth between these two views all over the 20th century, and and we have lost a little bit, I think, the main ideas of Keynes during this debate. First of all, there's been an identification of Keynes with the size of government, and I think this is quite a misrepresentation of the Keynesian theory. Except in the last chapter of the general theory, Keynes speaks more about a government that is actually capable of getting in and out of the economy when it's needed to compensate for the failure of markets to coordinate on a full employment equilibrium. This size of the government is more a question of the social contract, and you can have Keynesian governments that are quite small in size. I think, for example, of the United States, where there has been lots of activism in fiscal and monetary policies, in spite of the social contract there being quite tilted towards markets. For example, the median voter in the United States still today is actually very opposed to public health care, for example, just to give you an example. And the other thing that I think has been lost a little bit in the discussion, that if you read Keynes, at least with the eyes that I've been reading it with recently, is that Keynes is very much worried, not so much about the idea of replicating an optimal market equilibrium, but is more worried about the idea of having a stable market equilibrium. And so this idea that the viability of the economy as a whole is more important than reaching the ideal solution and the ideal equilibrium is, in my opinion, quite interesting. And last but not least, and once again, I already mentioned it, I mention it again, the other thing that we have in Keynes as somehow has been the main line of work of Mariana Mazzucato is the idea that the state does more than just correcting market failures. It sometimes creates new opportunities. That is really the idea of the entrepreneurial state. Okay. This back and forth has led. Bisogna condividerle, io non sono un Mac, io i Mac li odio perché non so manco dove mettere le mani, quindi io sono un fan di Bill Gates. Grazie. This back and forth in the 70s settles on what we have, I mean, some people have been calling the new Keynesian theory. I mean, I would say that theory has very little of Keynesian in the sense of the Keynes I just described. It's basically a revised version of the neoclassical theory, mostly because it's centered on this idea of the natural equilibrium, which is a construct that has been introduced by Friedman, by the way, and that the economy overall tends to go back to this natural equilibrium. Actually, the natural equilibrium is defined as the attractor of the economy. And so in this framework, there is very little room for this lack of coordination on optimal markets. I mean, this can only be, by definition, temporary. And the fact that it is temporary makes this consensus that emerges at the end of the 70s, early 80s, basically a revised version of the neoclassical theory. The idea of calling that the new Keynesian model, I think, was a very nice marketing tool, but does not really reflect the reality of that model. And that view of the world, if you think about it, is basically giving the same policy prescription. The only role for the government is not so much, I mean, there is some role, of course, in the very short term for monetary policy, mostly monetary, not fiscal policy, to accelerate the return of the economy to the equilibrium, but most of the job of governments needs to be leveling the playing field, so making sure that there are no rigidities that hamper the working of markets. In that sense, the policy prescriptions are quite simple. Monetary policy needs to anchor expectations through nominal stability. Reforms need to eliminate any distortions on the price setting mechanism, basically by implementing, by eliminating rigidities of whatever type they have. And there is basically no role for fiscal policy, whose task is just not to bother markets. And that is best done, this stability of macroeconomic policy is best done by the implementation of rules. So those who have my age have been studying macroeconomics between the end of the 90s and the beginning of, I mean, at the turn of the century, we have been imposed in macroeconomics. Basically, the curriculum in macroeconomics was basically fiscal rules and monetary rules all over, and there was very little else than that. And the idea, I repeat, is that rules are the best way to ensure that government action is predictable and there is no noise in the decision-making process of markets that are by themselves optimal. Okay. Within this framework, inequality and the distribution of income is, of course, a non-issue. Okay. Markets are, if markets reach the efficient equilibrium once the conditions are in place, the only job of economists is to basically make sure the conditions for efficiency are there, and so that the size of the pie is larger. And that is also something that my generation has been taught in macroeconomics classes. Of course, there may be some reasons for changing the size of the slices of the pie, but this needs to, I mean, this is an extra economic reason, if you want, and that needs to be done rigorously without hampering and without changing the incentives, and so without hampering the size of the pie. So there is a sort of disconnect between the efficiency, the size of the pie, and the distribution, the size of each slice, and these two things were seen at the time as alternative. I remember professors of macroeconomics saying you need to make a choice between being efficient and being fair. And that is something that in the recent past has been challenged on many grounds. And you think about it, that view of the world is pretty much very present. This is something I took from all presentations I made in 2017. In 2017, we had Trump just elected for his first term. We had Macron just elected for his first term. And what struck me at the time is that both has the first significant policy act slash taxes on capital and on high incomes. And in both cases, the justification was basically trickle-down economics. So we have to lighten the burden on those who, because they're richer and because we live in a world of efficient markets, if they're richer, are also more productive, because that will increase overall productivity, and then this increase in well-being will trickle down also to those who are initially hampered by the redistribution towards the top. It's basically the idea that the tide lifts all boats. And we all know how weak, once again, this is a crowd where I don't have to spend any time doing that. We know how weak that is, both theoretically and empirically, okay? The other thing I would like you to notice is that this consensus, as just described, emerged at the end of the 1980s, in the mid 1980s, I would say, and that is when we were having our discussions here, the Delors report and all the subsequent discussion on the shape that the monetary union in Europe should take. And so, as it is normal, Keynes say that every practical man is under the influence of more or less leading economists, and as it is normal, these consensuses, these majority view that was emerging in economics percolated, that yes, trickled down in the European institutions. So we have the monetary and fiscal policies are constrained by very precise norms that actually force them to follow rules. The Stability and Growth Pact is a fiscal rule that prevents discretionary economic policy, which is fiscal policy, which is the policy that markets should fear, according to the theory, because it makes unpredictable the behavior of governments, and that is in the way of forming optimal plans. Monetary policy has a very strict inflation targeting, and that is something that at the time generalized to most central banks, one of the few exceptions being the Federal Reserve in the United States, where we still today have a dual mandate. Let's see if this is also something Trump will eventually tackle. And the very strong, and this goes closer to what I would like to do in the second part of this short talk, and we also had a very strong emphasis on competition policy as the best way for governments to enable technical progress and growth. And that the idea there is that we need to have, that the state needs to basically level the playing field, make sure that there is no appearance of rents that are the obstacle to the obtention of optimal or of efficient equilibria. And that is done if you think of the doctrine on state aid, if you think of the doctrine on mergers and acquisitions. All of these things are really have in mind the idea that you should prevent any market power to emerge, because that eventually stands in the way of the optimal equilibrium. And of course, that means that Europe has basically given up, by endowing itself with those institutions, industrial policy, and in general, a proactive role of the state in the economy. And if you think about the management of the sovereign debt crisis by the European countries, that view also emerged at the time, because the response to the sovereign debt crisis, to the problems that Greece revealed in its public finances, was a generalization of a combo made of reforms on one side and fiscal consolidation or austerity on the other, with the idea in the back that the crisis was due to an excessive role of an inefficient government in the economy. Also, that we know how it ended. I don't need to tell you here. Okay. The crisis of 2008, I say in the introduction, the crisis of 2008 has reshuffled a little bit this consensus, even within the mainstream circles, even within these basically neoclassical tradition that is the new consensus, the new Keynesian literature. We have had quite an interesting, I would say, and rich rethinking of all the old dogma. We had papers on the importance of capital controls. We had papers on the slope of the Phillips curve and of the implication of this flattening of the Phillips curve for the trade-off between employment and price control. We had lots of work on fiscal policy. We had lots of work on industrial policy. In particular, fiscal policy that had been not only, the new consensus not only had a very limited role for macroeconomic policy, but within this very limited role for macroeconomic policy, it also had a very clear prioritization. Okay, so we had that monetary policy was the main tool to use was in the rare instances where you needed to actually intervene in the economy, and fiscal policy was really the last resort. I mean, the myth of the almighty central bankers that is represented by this book by Bob Woodward, the biography of Greenspan by Bob Woodward, what that was called Maestros, says it all, right? So we saw the central bankers are as beacons of stability, of macroeconomic stabilities that were enabling markets and making markets work towards European equilibrium, and fiscal policy was really literally in a closet and had no role in the theory. And I repeat, we can see that very clearly in the institutional setup of the European, of the monetary and economic and monetary union in Europe. So the main innovation, I would say, even within the mainstream theory that we have since 2010, is that today the mood on fiscal policy has changed. Okay, so we have different phases. In 2008, 2009, fiscal policy came with a standard, classical, traditional Keynesian flavor as a way to sustain, to aggregate demand after the financial crisis that had led to a drastic drop of private demand. Then we had a long, very interesting period. I was mentioning before the slope of the Phillips curve, with a very interesting analytical and from a policy perspective period in which there was a situation of basically negative real interest rates and the central banks working at the lower bound, that led many economists to actually argue that we were in a new circular stagnation in which basically monetary policy had lost traction, and we needed to have a permanent support. So we had to have a permanent Keynesian support to aggregate demand, because there was a chronic, permanent deficit of excess of savings over investment. That was the debate we had before, of course, inflation. Then we had COVID with the clear need of global public good, think of health, think of education, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, also in part because of the debate on inflation, and more importantly, because of the debate on the ecological and digital transition, we had an emphasis on the role of fiscal policy in basically industrial policies and in enhancing the structural transformation. This is what I would like to focus in the remaining of the presentation. This new industrial policy is quite different. It's quite different from the industrial policy we studied when we were at the university, and that in general, that was the consensus before. Okay? So it's certainly not competition policy, so just leveling the playing field and let markets pick the winners. That is not the case anymore. And it's certainly not the creation of big oligopolies, big champions, be them European, national, that depends, that go and compete on international markets for market shares with other champions from other countries. There was, for example, a quite interesting letter by the economy ministers of France and Germany in 2018, if I remember correctly, challenging a decision of the Commission on Alstom, on the merger between Alstom and Siemens, in which they said we need this merger because we need a huge actor, a large actor capable of competing with American and Chinese actors. This discussion is still lively today. I mean, there was an article I read in the Financial Times a couple of days ago on the need to relax a little bit the competition rules of the European Union, because we need these champions. So this is there. But those who work on industrial policy, I cite here a few names, you may recognize them. These economists have a much more multidimensional idea of industrial policy, which is not very macro. Actually, it's very much structural and microeconomic. And the idea is that industrial policy needs to act in a surgical way to resolve bottlenecks and problems that can be different from sectors to sector. That emerged also in the debate on inflation. There were some economists who argued that the best way to fight inflation was not so much monetary policy, but it was to go on the fiscal side to solve the problems that were emerging in different sectors because there were sectoral imbalances, and that translates in a more long-term perspective in how to enhance growth and productivity. So the idea is that you need to use different instruments because the problems that each sector has are of course different. And these instruments go from the incentives to private investment to the protection of other investment. The debate on tariffs that is happening right now kind of echoes this idea that tariffs are today considered, beside the use that Trump is making of them as a way to bully other countries. I mean, this is, of course, just a power perspective, but besides his personal view on tariffs has been around for a few years now, or anyway, the protection of domestic markets has been around in recent years as one of the many legitimate tools we have to solve the problems that emerge in specific sectors. And that, once again, is something that we discovered today, but I would say we rediscovered today, because that was exactly what industrial policy was during the famous that I was mentioning before, this long era of domination of the Keynesian theory, that besides macroeconomic stabilization, also had a very strong emphasis on the role of the state in trying to boost growth in innovation and productivity by intervening on different sectors using, I repeat once again, what is really crucial here is the idea that we need to use a multiplicity of instruments, because the obstacles to productivity growth are different from sector to sector, from period to period. Okay? In my opinion, an excellent case study for this new view on industrial policy. Let's see how much of it will survive the change of administration in the United States. Is precisely the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act has a name that, once again, it's a marketing tool. It's a name that was used by the Biden administration to pass the act in Congress. It has very little to do, actually, with the reduction of inflation. It has much more to do with the reindustrialization of the United States. You can see, I won't go into the details, see them on the slides. I would like just you to notice that one of the important things that this act does is to provide a stable flow of demand for in some sectors, in order to make sure that new activities have, from the very beginning, a market, and as such can rely on demand, and by relying on demand they can rely on a stream of revenues, and hence that should trigger investment. So we go back to what I was saying before, the idea that the government role in Keynes is providing stability, but not the nominal stability of a new consensus, stability of expectations of macroeconomic conditions, so that private investment can thrive. And the second thing I would like you to notice is that there are also social provisions and fiscal provisions. It is within the IRA that there is this idea that we need big corporations to contribute, and so there needs to be a minimum tax of 15%. That will certainly not survive the new administration. And there is this social component, so this requirement for firms to access subsidies, that they put in place some measures for the well-being of workers. So there's really a very wide range of policies that are in just one single act. And of course, there's also this U.S. input requirement that has been bothering a lot European policy makers. Okay. An important part of this new industrial policy is, of course, public investment. Public investment is back at the center of the debate. It's not back of the center of the policies. We have a chronic deficiency of public investment that's not solved yet, in spite, for example, of the Next Generation EU. But since the mid-2010, it has been back, at least in the policy discussion. That started, surprisingly, with a speech by Mario Draghi. At the time he was still president of the ECB, in Jackson Hole. We were fully in the discussion on circular stagnation, and Draghi in that speech in Jackson Hole basically said, we will do whatever it takes, sorry for the citation, we will do what we need to do to keep interest rates low and to keep the spread on public debt low through expansion of monetary policies for as long as we need, but be aware that that will not restart the economy. Once again, monetary policy did not have traction at the time, and the only way to actually get out of this trap is to also use fiscal policy. At the time, Draghi was extremely prudent. He was the president of the ECB, so he said that needs to be done within the margins given by the Stability Pact. So basically, he was calling for the Eurozone countries to do it, not for the peripheral ones. So it was very clear that he was not calling for scrapping the rule at the time, but at least he said we need a globally expansionist fiscal stance passing through public investment to get out of this circular stagnation. And the fact is that public investment has and had been decreasing since the early 1980s. This is a figure that I took from a paper I wrote a few years ago, and this is the ratio in different decades of capital expenditure and current expenditure in a few countries. If you don't see them in the slides, these are France, Germany, Italy, Spain, United Kingdom, and the United States. I really need my glasses. And as you can see, this ratio has been going down in every country. So there's been a regardless of the size of the public sector, there has been a reallocation between current and public and capital expenditure. The fiscal consolidations that started in 2008, in 2010, in most countries have actually pushed this trend forward. This shows the difference of different expenditure. So the first bar is current expenditure, the second is capital expenditure, and the third is interest payment. You can see that the dark, so the capital expenditure, has been going down a lot in Southern Europe, which are the countries where fiscal consolidation was stronger, but it has been going down everywhere, whereas current expenditure has been increasing with respect to the pre-financial crisis averages. Okay, and the interesting thing of this debate is that it's now quite, at least is something in which we are all on the same boat in Europe, that drop in public investment, that deterioration of public capital actually is generalized even to the richer and stronger, at least at the time, Eurozone countries. And these are a few. These were taken from something I will mention in a moment. There is in Germany today we would need around 45 billions of public investment per year, not to implement the transitions, not to let's say to bring the capital stock up to the challenges that we're facing, geopolitical and economic challenges. These 45 billions per year would be what is needed just to fill the gap that has been created by the past 20 years of under investment. So that will be much larger if we also consider for example, transitions, strategic autonomy, defense, and all the things that we are discussing. I mean, this is also something that is so consensual that now, that was the part of the Draghi report that came out in September, that was more cited, but also less challenged by other economies, that there is a need of 5% of GDP next investment to try to catch up with the United States and with China, and of this 5%, more or less half of it should be public investment. So we're talking about 2 to 3% of additional public investment for the EU as a whole. And so public investment is today once again, not so much in the policies, unfortunately, but certainly in the debate among economists and policymakers, one of the pillars of this new industrial policy I was mentioning before. Okay, so short commercial detour, like we are midway in the presentation, so I'm allowed a break. And this commercial detour I can do it because, I mean, this is some work we have been doing with my colleague Forlani for many years now, and it's free, no copyright, it's Creative Commons, so you can download it for free, so there is no self-interest in this commercial. This is a report that came out last December. Anna, who's here, wrote a chapter on the automotive, on public investment for the structural transformation, so for industrial policy, in which we collect a number of essays by colleagues in different institutions around Europe, and there are a few messages that emerge from that. And that is actually a part of a series that has been going on since 2020. So it's the fifth issue. We had one in 2021 that was devoted to Next Generation EU, then one to the green transition, and the one in 2023 was devoted to how to protect public investment from the wave of fiscal consolidation that we could see, that everybody could see coming already in 2022, 2023. Just as a preview, we decided that the next issue that will come out in the next fall will be on the energy transition, a subset of the green transition we devoted. Okay, what comes out from these reports and in general from the recent debate on public investment? The first thing, I think, probably the most important thing that emerges, and it goes back to what was said in the introduction on the quality of work, if you want, or quality of jobs, and so, is that we need investment to resume both in tangible but also in intangible capital. So we need to get past this accounting distinction between current and capital expenditure, because there are many current expenditure are in fact investment in social capital. There have been a few chapters in the different reports that have been highlighting the importance of that. The second, what I was mentioning already before, that the shortfall of public capital is really transversal. It's really not something that only concerns the poorer European countries, and the fact that we need to get past once and for all this crowding out myth, this wrong idea with quality procurement. So this idea that public investment crowds out private investment is right at the contrary. I will show you in the next slide. And last but not least, and will be the last part of what I want to say, is that the current European fiscal framework is absolutely incapable of 10 minutes, okay? It's absolutely incapable of ensuring the flow of investment that European countries need. And I repeat, that came out in a completely decentralized ways by the many authors from many different institutions, from many different cultural and academic backgrounds, across all the reports that we wrote. And I repeat, these are themes that emerge in general if you follow the debate on public investment from most of the work that is done on the subject. Okay. For example, on the crowding in and out of public investment, there is a group of INAPP researchers who wrote a chapter for one of our outlooks a couple of years back, and they show that the impact of public investment on private investment is most of the time positive. So there is no crowding out. On the contrary, there is crowding in. Private investment is stronger and more dynamic in countries where there is an adequate capital stock. It's so trivial that I'm almost ashamed to say it, but now it is in the empirical literature, so with numbers, we have multipliers. And of course, this is all the more true when you are at the zero bound. So when these are typical results that you find in general in the literature on multipliers, when you have very high uncertainty, once again, the role of the Keynesian, the essence of the Keynesian message is that macroeconomic policy stabilizes the expectations and provides them a stable macroeconomic environment, and so triggers private expenditure. So the higher the uncertainty, the more important it is a public investment to foster a private accumulation of capital by the private sector. And of course, I mean, this is quite typical, as hard as it is to measure it, the importance of institutional quality for the size of the multiplier. And there was quite an interesting report by the European Investment Bank that came out also 2 or 3 years ago, in which they showed how in the digital transition, for example, public investment is absolutely crucial to the private investment, both in physical capital and in human capital. And so in the field of the digital transition, you can see this crowding effect very strong, appearing very strong. The second thing that emerges, in my opinion, quite a lot from the recent literature on public investment is that this idea of the bloodbath. The Italian in the room may remember that a minister a couple of years back said that the ecological transition would be a bloodbath. And this idea that it is a bloodbath is actually also quite weak. The available evidence points to the fact that the potential for productivity growth of green investments very high. This chapter, it was a working paper before. This chapter in one of the outlooks shows, for example, that the green multipliers, or the multipliers associated with green investment, are way larger than the multipliers associated with fossil fuels, with brown investment. And so this idea that we need to choose between growing and ecological transition seems also something that is at least needs to be qualified much better, because the green investment seems to be also a very powerful engine for growth. Nevertheless, and I will go to the last part of my presentation. Nevertheless, the investor state is certainly not enough. Once again, we need a fully fledged reconsideration of the role of the state. Here I will go on a lecture as Nobel gave a couple of days before getting his Nobel Prize in Paris. I happened to be there almost by chance, and I found it quite interesting, actually, and on a paper that you see there. He actually is working a little bit on this, on how to deal with this artificial intelligence revolution, which is, of course, a potential disruptive factor for the economy. He mentions that you could have what we call a techno-optimist view, saying that the technological progress by increasing productivity ends up by increasing wages and by yielding shared prosperity for the economy as a whole. And then, of course, he quickly goes into what could go wrong, and what could go wrong is what we see happen in the past. And once again, very much within a mainstream and very standard framework, he notices how the technological progress can lead to an increase in average productivity or to an increase in marginal productivity. In the first case, you have a redistribution from workers to capitalists. In the second case, you have an increase in wages. He's really within the framework in which wages reflect marginal productivity. What I found extremely interesting, he makes examples of cases in which you have technological progress that led to this shared prosperity, to these increasing wages, and of cases in which it is not. Here you see the case, for example, of the self-checkout counters in supermarkets. He made in the lecture that have no impact on wages or on productivity. They are just a distribution of income between workers and the capital owners. It's quite surprising coming through. And he says, and this is what I found quite interesting, he says it's in the end, which way we go, it's a problem of the choice of the policy makers. And that, if you think about it from an economist that works within a theoretical framework that is a framework based on on optimal solutions, and so of no choice, because if you have an optimal solution, you don't have a choice. I mean, the choice is just to go to the first best. Is quite a radical shift. Okay, and he ends, I'm running out of time, so let me, he ends with noticing that historically there has been a period in which there was the shared prosperity result. So the choice of policymakers was such that the fruits of technological progress were shared more or less equally. And that virtuous dynamics broke down in the early 80s. And once again, he doesn't say it, I say it. It corresponds to a very radical shift in the choice of policy makers, and that actually led to higher inequality and, of course, to a concentration of power, not just economic power, but also political power. And I think the picture says it all. So what is the solution? He says we need public policies to actually steer innovation towards this shared prosperity. And the list, it's of course quite generic here. The list is nevertheless quite interesting. He says that we need, of course, to rethink the relationship between big businesses, and especially in the tech sector, and consumers. He says we need to use taxes to give incentives to business models that favor labor. He speaks, once again, quite surprising in his theoretical framework of voice. So he speaks explicitly about giving power to unions and to going back to a collective bargaining, investment, and of course the development of skill. You need to in order to regulate an industry, you need to have the people who actually know how to work it. Okay, and this idea of policies that actually steer innovation is also something that we can see in the ecological transition. Very quick, because I'm running out of time. You have the ecological transition is the realm of externalities. So it's the realm where you have very strong distribution impact of whatever you do. You don't do anything. Climate change will have distribution impact. You implement the transition, that will have a distribution impact, and usually it's the usual suspects who win, the usual suspects who lose, and so it needs to be governed. And there is clearly a need to govern that transition. Here I will just refer you to this quite interesting policy brief that was written by an economist at ATWIL, the trade union institutes, who basically says that we need to have first of all, we cannot have an industrial transition without reindustrialization. So Europe has no choice but to play the game of reindustrialization and to go and fight with China and the United States on the field of industrial policy, and that we need social policies. And of course, he mentions central fiscal capacity. Central fiscal capacity, that will be the last thing I say, that will, of course, be a first best. Okay, having today the capacity, the fiscal space at the European level to implement these policies, both social and industrial, to steer the economy towards the transition would be, of course, a first best. It's more efficient than national policy, of course. Saying that means nothing, because there is no way that today we can see that appearing, given the current situation in Germany and France, given the different interests of different countries, given the composition of the European Parliament. I don't see how this topic, this theme of the central fiscal capacity might be something that we can realistically count on developing in the next few years. And so we need to rely on national governments. Today, the road to industrial and social policies is certainly national governments, and here I'm also very pessimistic. There has been a reform of the Stability Pact. I will not go into the details, maybe in the discussion, and this this reform has changed nothing. There was a good, decent proposal by the Commission that was basically torn apart by the negotiation process. And today, this Stability Pact bites and constrains fiscal policies as much as it did before 2023 in the old version. Okay, and so what is the last conclusion? My conclusion is that we are in an extremely difficult situation. If there were some doubts that multilateralism was dead, the election of Trump and the first 2 days in office made it clear that that was an illusion. Europe is going back to a sort of Groundhog Day dynamics in which we are back to fiscal policies that break where monetary policy accelerates. It reminds, I think, many in this room of something, what happened in 2010, 2012. We don't have any political space for discussion on common tools for industrial policy and investment, and we just had a reform that is not working. Okay, so there is very much room for being pessimistic, except maybe for something. It's Germany. Germany is in such a bad shape that maybe if they really go against a war, finally they will agree at reopening the discussion on fiscal rules. Sorry, it was a bit long.
Thank you to Saraceno for this very interesting, stimulating speech. We have just 5 minutes for 2 questions from the floor, if there is some question. One, Professor Pietrobelli, and the second one, if there is one. Okay, Professor Simonazzi. So,
thank you very much. This is Carlo Pietrobelli from here, Roma 3. Ciao, Francesco. Thank you very much for your speech. I would like to raise a couple of issues or questions. First, when you described and analyzed the European approach to industrial policy, you seem to consider Europe as if it were isolated. In my mind, you didn't take into account enough, or perhaps it's just a matter of emphasis, the issue of the geopolitical fragmentation. My suspect is that a lot of what industrial policies are in Europe, in the US, in China, and other places is related to this interdependence. Brazil is undertaking a different kind of industrial policy because they are reacting to what is happening in Europe and elsewhere and so on. So there's a loop, there's something that I failed to capture in your analysis. Secondly, I would like to have your opinion about how you think global commons, global public goods are being pursued. And it would include knowledge, it would include health, climate, equality, and so on. You said a few words on that. My feeling is that you think that they are not being pursued. I would think that they are central in a new concept of industrial policy. I want to hear your opinion. Thank you.
No, you must speak here.
Thank you for your very interesting talk. One question relating to industrial policy as well, and to geopolitical fragmentation or division, but inside the European Union. And there are 2 questions relating to industrial policy. The first is, how do we implement industrial policy and stressing the multinational dimension? 2 questions. Perhaps there are some criticism of industrial policy which we shouldn't take to let's say, easy. The first is state aid. At the moment, state aid is a very divided question, because if you complement it with fiscal capacity, we can have a very different impact within Europe. And this is the most important thing, I would say, when you implement transition towards energy and all that. And a related question is competition versus national champions. There are, of course, problems with the scale economies, if we are competing with the United States and China in certain sectors, size must be important. But how do we complement this with the abuse of dominant position and all that? So how to make coordinate or to make complementary the need for scale economies, efficiency, competition, and on the other side, let's say regulation, which was a most important policy of the European Union.
Thank you. So, Francesco, 5 minutes to answer, no more.
Be very quick. But there are two questions on the political fragmentation, and I'm afraid I missed my presentation if that didn't emerge from what I said. No, I was very quick in the end. Okay, the multilateralism is that maybe it will be resurrected in a different life, but I mean, today is that. And by the way, a short parenthesis, I'm not sure things would have been very different with Harris, okay, with the Democrat administration. I think that the United States have been drifting away from this sort of set of common rules, especially on trade, already for a while. And the IRA is really something that is, as it is not normal and obvious, that is centered on the American interest, and they do whatever it takes, once again, to push it, regardless of what's happening in the country. And I agree, and I agree that this is a huge problem for Europe, because Europe is still living as if it was in that system. Okay, so as if it was a system in which we would rely on common rules and on cooperation to pursue the common good. No, we are in a world in which we have to compete for resources, we have to compete for primacy in technological advances on AI now. There's this Chinese competitor to ChatGPT. I don't see any European competitor emerging. So that is what the game the others are playing, and Europe is not playing it. Okay, so if it didn't come out from my presentation, I'm sorry. It's clear that we are. That's the reason why I'm so pessimistic in the last couple of slides, because we are still not getting that the world has changed. In this sense, let me say something that, given what the figure, the picture I just showed you, can be a little bit dangerous. In this sense, maybe Trump is almost welcome news. I mean, the fiction is over. The fiction is over. We could have thought that this world existed with a different administration. With this administration, we will need to actually get our act together, and that leads to Anna's question. How do we get our act together if we have countries that are basically A, working in sparse order, B, diverging on any dimension, both macroeconomic and structural, and that is where it becomes difficult. That is why I think a way of putting together a tool for common policies would have been optimal, because a central capacity to allocate resources and to planify investment projects, both material, so intangible capital, but also social investment would have been much better, because it could have taken the, for example, issue of regional convergence, regional and country convergence into account. It's a typical externality that you can better tackle with centralized policies. If that doesn't happen, and I don't think, I repeat, that will happen, the issue will be how to coordinate national policies. And so the issue of state aid, I totally agree. On one side, one would say, finally, we relax a little bit this very stupid norm that prevented countries from implementing industrial policies. On the other, we do it in a framework where you have strong constraints, and so different fiscal space that risks, once again, fostering the regional divergence. The relaxation of state aid certainly would benefit Germany much more than Greece or Italy, and that is, of course, an issue that we have to deal with. Last very short remark. The point is, maybe here I will see it differently from Anna. It's not a question of choosing between competition and national champions or finding a way to make those compatible, but I think it would be much more interesting to embrace this Roderick et al. Vision of industrial policy as actually really going with a wide range of policies, not just focusing on this old debate, which is the debate that is actually still up. I repeat, the article was mentioned by the Financial Times. I think I read it on the way here yesterday morning. So it's really an article that came out 2 days ago. Still, should we relax the norms of competition so that we can have national champions? So we have much more to do than just that. So, feedback. I was in the way of coffee break.
No, però lo deve usare, ce l'ha temporaneamente.
Abbiamo la protezione
Qui posso uscire.
Però mi dovresti mettere una scansia.
Sì, allora adesso
ce l'ho già su.
sì, sì.
Vorrei che interagisca in qualche modo che si può
Io mi sono ha verticalizzato e poi
ma pure lo zaino? Come stai? Un po' le prese con prima
deve essere quello è il tema, la cittadina della posizione
Sì, possiamo usare questo perché non funziona quel webcam, quindi stiamo usando questa, questo per inquadrare chi parla.
Quindi chi parla si siede qua?
Si siede davanti a questo.
Perfetto, però devi utilizzare questo. Vabbè, fai tu.
No, sempre da qui. Volendo anche da lì, è la stessa.
Allora ti dico.
Sì.
Io ti ho seguito su YouTube, grazie. Sì, cioè, ci sono i professori che rubano le cose, qua sarà tagliare i foto, soprattutto quelli meridionali, soprattutto i meridionali, vanno là, Okay. Allora, sì, questa qui bisogna trasportarla sul destro, questa cartella. Quindi poi bisogna solo condividere, giusto?
Sì, un attimo solo.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. Welcome back to this session. From this room, we are on the YouTube Direct. So I ask each speaker to come here, and then to present, sharing the slide, but we already said almost everything. Let me say that this session has been organized together with Dario Guarascio, and actually is part of the PRIM project that we have on platformization of economy. The PRIM project title is Living and Working Condition in the Platform Economy. Some of the papers that will be presented today are part of this big project that we are developing together, University of Bari, Sapienza, and University Bocconi, Department of Political Science, together with Zach Parolin. Unfortunately, he was not able to be here. Said that, I will ask Jacopo, who is the first presenter, to come here. The first paper, which is a joint work together with Dario and myself, is titled The Impact of Amazon on Italian Local Labor Markets. So I suggest 20 minutes each, and then we have some minutes to collect question, reflection, and so on, and that's it. And obviously, I'm very happy that we have Sara Kassem here and Clara Prinzi coming from the Scuola Normale Superiore, and also Francesco is coming from Cattolica, who are not formally part of the project, but they are very much working on these issues. So, Jacopo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valeria. Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone has had a nice wake up with Francesco Saraceno. So this is our project is the impact of Amazon on Italian local labor markets, a slightly different approach. So why we did that? Full screen? That's more than that, I don't know. Sorry.
I think it's already full screen.
So it's full screen here.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, Professor Pietrobelli. I'll try to speak louder as to. So why we did this? We did this because Amazon is the largest digital platform in the world by market capitalization. So it has it lends interest to itself just by itself. We have qualitative evidence on the labor process in Amazon, on working conditions in the warehouses, and in general on how Amazon works. At the same time, there is the lack of data on Amazon when it comes to classic, let's say, economic variables concerning labor. And almost no data on Amazon when it comes to the European context, as the usual data comes from the United States and the United States situation. Plus, there's a lack of heterogeneity when it comes to different labor markets and different impacts that Amazon may have regarding local labor markets that are more into industrial areas, maybe far away from cities, and more urban local labor market. So Amazon in Italy, as we can see from this very basic descriptive statistics, is largely dominant in online retail in general. So we can also, it's safe to say that it has a strong position in the logistics demand market. Amazon is widely regarded in Italy as a bringer of jobs. Most headlines you will find if you tap Amazon and look for news on Google is about Amazon hiring everywhere, in Pisa, in Abruzzo, where I'm from, in Turin, in Italy as a whole. But at the same time, from what we can gather in the United States, Amazon has turned a middle-class warehouse career into a Mac job, as this headline from a few years ago run in Bloomberg. Meaning that the wages at Amazon and the way the labor is performed at Amazon is strongly different from what was warehousing, what was logistics in the past. And Amazon can exert some strengths with its technical process and with its market power in order to lower wages in the markets in which it is interested. At the same time, we can see that this is not something that did not happen in Italy. Also in Italy, Amazon does as it pleases with the labor process, can fire workers, and sometimes the promised hiring does not materialize fully, and the levels of turnovers are very high. One could say you could sell on Amazon, so maybe manufacturers could be positively benefited by the fact that Amazon is there. But at the same time, most products that are on Amazon at any given time tend to come from Asian countries. And the competition is so strong and steep that you can end up in that Temu-style bargain corner. So, and everyone knows maybe what is Temu, which is like the cheap version of Alibaba, which is already the cheap version of Amazon, and sells for a few cents in any place. So what do we have in the literature? We can say that we have literature concerning gig workers, and platformized workplaces, platform-dependent firms, which we're working also together with Dario, and we will present it later. We have literature on digital terrorism from Amazon workers, meaning that there is a digitalization of the labor process and robotization of the labor process, bringing together and they are brought together in order to control labor to an extent and streamline production of logistics work. And we have some literature on impacts at the local level. We have a crowding out of existing firms. We have damage on. We have inter-firm relationships in logistics that change, and we have influxes of temporary jobs. We have some literature concerning Italy regarding the impact of large establishments as events in a given local labor market. And we have that too regarding the United States. Wilshire is about, Walmart. Celice Pellegrini, it's about closures. Seabauer et al., it's about openings. Our key reference, though, is Trava, Otilsing, and Zeng. These four scholars, they work on Amazon fulfillment centers in the United States. And we can see their framework is basically this one. And theoretically, they say this. There can be, we say this, and it's also something that they say. So we have a direct impact on logistics and transportation workers, which can be positive in wages and employment. Yet, since Amazon is such a large player, and because of the techno-economic conditions of labor at Amazon that we know of, Amazon can exert monopsonistic power. So in some way, it can exert power downstream on its subcontractors. So there can be rate increases in employments, but a counterbalancing diminishing force on wages, because Amazon can push down the wages. At the same time, there can be disruption of local brick-and-mortar retailers and chains and malls and so on and so forth, as Trava et al. Tend to say, which yields negative consequences on both wages and employment. And Amazon can be thought of as a vector for increased competition from abroad. So there can be an influx of goods from abroad, and low-cost producer can crowd out local ones. What do we use as a way to identify different effects? There are Amazon fulfillment centers, and they are farther away from cities and customers. They're big hiring events. They are very large. You can see them if you ever drive on a highway outside of Rome towards Florence, for instance, or toward Naples. They are mostly logistics and transportation related impacts. We we tend to say, when we say it's safe to say that, because we are further away from cities, we're further away from major retail establishments, so on and so forth. While in delivery, instead, delivery stations are closer to cities, and they have a smaller local employment impact. So we say that if there is an effect, the effect is to bring Amazon closer to customers. When it brings Amazon closer to customers, you can say that there is increased competition with local brick and mortar retailers. So we have more of the disruption effect that we talked about just before. So with this paper, we just want to provide the first empirical evidence of the impact of Amazon on Italian local labor markets. We rely on public available data and an event study methodology. We have two main issues. What is the impact on wages and employment of new Amazon facilities, and whether this impact changes according to whether the facility is a fulfillment center or a delivery station, proxy for what we said before. The data sources are public available data at the municipality level from the Italian Ministry of Economic and Finance. We have local labor market aggregations for employment. Local labor markets are built by ISTAT based on commuting zones and commuting matrices. So they already give us a proxy on whether people are moving from a place to another. We have a list of Amazon facilities that is drawn from a logistic consulting company that's called mvpwl.com, which is widely used in the literature. We have two outcome variables. We have the average log wage per capita at the municipality level, and we have at the local labor market level the unemployment rate. We have very basic control variables. We have income from rents. We have the income level in the whole local labor market. Income from rents kind of proxies for whether a place is rich or not. Income level in the local labor market also takes away the heterogeneity that can come from having different municipalities maybe play out in different ways. And we have a population over 15 in the local labor market. So this is just a few maps, two maps to show what happens. So Amazon, this is called the big descent. In the beginning, you have just Amazon in the north. And then as time goes by, there's Amazon descends in the south and conquers the islands, so to speak. And the conquering of the islands is mostly made up of delivery stations, while the fulfillment centers went up to here in our data, which is called Levrero, close to here. Actually, there is another fulfillment center that has been built in San Salvo, but we don't have data for that around here. We have an econometric strategy, which is very simple. We compare local labor markets in which municipalities in local labor markets in which there is Amazon and municipalities in which there is no Amazon on the first stage. At the same time, since we want to be more robust, we compare municipalities in a year in which there is Amazon and local labor market and municipalities in which there will be Amazon maybe in the next year. In that way, we have the following assumption. Amazon will choose some local labor markets according to a series of characteristics and rules that we don't care about, but we don't know, and we cannot measure. But we can say that Amazon chose those municipalities in the past and will choose them in the future. And so we can compare municipalities and local labor markets at different years. This is basically what it is. This is the main specification. And this is what I just explained. We have municipality, local labor market fixed effects. We have time fixed effects. We have a post-Amazon dummy. We have a vector of controls, which is empty in the baseline. We try to have, for the economists, a non-parametric approach in the beginning, and then we go on and we add the controls to make it safer for us. And these are the results. So we have these are results that are static So in here, we are appreciating the impact of Amazon. No questions asked, just a simple average treatment effect on the treated, okay? So we can say that the impact is negative in log wages for the full sample, for the fulfillment center, for the delivery stations. We can similarly observe that for the unemployment rate, the impact is positive, meaning that the unemployment rate increases. Yet we take these results with a grain of salt, meaning that this is instead the dynamic effects, meaning that what happens in the point of impact and then what happens afterwards. We can see that for the whole sample, there's a classic steep decrease. For fulfillment center, the impact is less clear. For delivery stations, the decrease is starker in log wages. For the unemployment rate, we can see the increase is mostly in fulfillment centers, while the unemployment rate stays mostly stable in local labor markets for delivery stations. It's not surprising given that those local labor markets are urban. So they tend to be more robust to this kind of disruptions. When we introduce not yet cheated controls, I'm not showing you the covariates ones, but the results are clear and I have them in the appendix if you want. In the not yet cheated controls, the picture is murkier, but more robust as for the reasons I have explained before. And we can see that the log wages decrease, but the effect is mostly in delivery stations, so in urban labor markets, while instead the impact on the unemployment rate kind of fades away, but never, and this I think is important, it becomes positive. So this is what we find so far. We are working on improving both the data collection and the methodology, implementing more and more robustness checks. Still, it is interesting to see that new Amazon facilities have significant impacts on wages, and this is average wages in local labor markets. That impact is negative. And the wage decrease is apparently close to delivery stations, so that happens in urban local labor markets and is attributable more to disruption dynamics rather than logistics dynamics so far. At the same time, apparently logistics dynamics are not strong enough in the positive sense so as to decrease the unemployment rate in those local labor markets. Hence, I think that in this paper provides evidence that the net effect of platform presence is not always beneficial, and the development associated with digital platforms is sometimes magnified to a larger extent, but it's also mystified to a large extent. And therefore, lawmakers and local administrators should take into account carefully their decisions when it comes to Amazon coming to town. That's it.
Thanks, Jacopo, for the presentation, very clear. So we can collect a couple of questions. Yes, of course, Sarah, we have a formal discussion, in the sense of opening the discussion. Also, this session is very interesting because actually we have an interdisciplinary composition. She's a sociologist, we have a mathematician, so I'm very proud of that. On the microphone.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for your presentation. As someone who's researched Amazon for many years, coming from the German context, it's nice to get more information on the Italian context. Now, straight off the bat, I would say that the research you're doing is really important because as a qualitative researcher, I can confirm indeed that we have a lot of information and research done on what are the conditions of the workers? And sometimes the critique we get is, okay, but what about the data? Do we have data to back this up? Because by and large, Amazon tends to sell itself, right, as a good employer. And in this sense, at least in Germany, we do know that they open up in areas with higher unemployment rates. They open up in areas with higher unemployment rates outside of cities to say we have a positive impact to actually decrease the unemployment rate. And we also give wages that are above minimum wages, which is important in the context of Germany. So I think the questions that I have coming from this background, and given your question, is number one, how does Amazon sell itself in Italy? Because depending on the country, exactly like you said, the context is important. And depending on the country Amazon operates in, sometimes it sells itself as we are a logistics company, and sometimes it sells itself as we are a retail company. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that, for example, in the context of Germany, they will say our wages are actually completely fine when we look at the logistics sector. We are in line with wages in the logistics sector, but the union is pushing for wages in the retail sector. So in a way, do we have information on, just in general, is Amazon a logistics company? How, like, does it construct itself as a logistics company in this context? Also, because you do mention logistics in this way. Then I was curious, how does, if you came across this in your research, how does Amazon, how do the wages in Amazon fit in with the sector by and large? So if it's a logistics company, are the wages, though, in relative terms, that different to other logistics companies? Or like, is the effect on wages in the general local labor market, or also we can see a specific correlation to the sector that we're discussing here? And at the very end, you discussed also the general implications. So, and you said like they should think twice before Amazon coming in as an employer. That was going to be my last question, is what can learning about Italy and the effects on wages in Italy tell us about, more generally, the implications of Amazon joining new countries also? Because we know that Amazon, as you said, they continue to expand in countries, they monopolize the countries they're in, and they grow in new countries as well. So in terms of like, you know, you kind of did talk about it, then is this a company people should welcome? Which or countries where they have higher unemployment rates, is this a good employer to bring in?
Right.
So collect. Can I answer her first, because I think it's going to be long.
Come on, yeah.
Okay. A couple of comments. First, the virus complete the benefits formation is forming, and how important for the heterogeneity of and the second is
Okay, you find that it increase occupations and employment and decrease salaries. Occupation, new employment is in sectors that can specific sectors, so it can change the sectoral composition of the economy after this new establishment. So the decrease in average salaries may depend on the change in sectoral composition. So this.
just a comment to what you said. In Italy, Amazon is logistic, but you have to pay attention to the fact that part of their workers work for cooperatives that are hired by them. That's the first problem. The second one is that I think in Germany the salary for workers in retail sector is higher than in logistic on average, while in Italy this is not that true. So maybe the fact is a little bit different from this point of view. And from this point of view, I want to ask you. You said that there could be a competition with smaller retail at the local level, but there could be also reverse causality. I mean, a lot of smaller retails are closing because of the generation who opens them is going in pensions, is retiring from work, and their new generation are not willing to work on that sector. So, I mean, it could be also the fact that basically those shops are going to close, and you use Amazon because otherwise the first shop on those goods is quite far from your house. Probably maybe it's not the case for Rome, that is a huge city, but if you take Bologna, my neighbor, a lot of kind of shops don't exist anymore, just because the new generation don't want to work on them. So you have this large neighborhood with very few shops.
I didn't manage to understand whether you managed to control for the employment effects in municipalities where Amazon is not present, because you get a result that Amazon, from what I understand, has a positive impact on employment and a negative impact on wages. But what happens in the next municipality? Perhaps workers move from there, so it increases employment in one municipality and decreases in the other one. So what is the net effect? I don't know whether you did it. I didn't understand.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. I'll be very quick. Okay, so for Professor Petrobelli's question, really quick, I control for population, so I take away any changes in population there can be between treated and controls by controlling for population. Plus, concerning from death and birth, I think that the first issue is that, yeah, reasons for closing are multiple, but the fact that a new firm is not born after is that, besides what you say about capabilities and wheels and all that, is also that there's no market space to open again, and that can be an act effect of Amazon presence or more presence or something else. In general, anyway, different framework controls for that, because firms are born and died, I don't think, at a differential rate between the two. Concerning controls, what do we use as controls? We used in the not yet specification, we use the local labor market that was not yet impacted by Amazon, but will be in the next period. Since we have a long panel, we are able to do that for multiple time periods. And so we can start controlling from 2015 using 2014 data, and doing that all the way up to 2020, and then still observe 2 years after, because we have until 2022. If it's sectoral composition, if it's decrease of our works or something else, I am not able to tell at this point because I don't have the data. My hunch is that this comes from a decrease in hours worked. And this comes to Sarah's point, because what we can say is that wages are, yeah, well above the minimum wage. But when I talked to trade unionists about what was going on, they told me, well, the issue is that they will get people with a logistics contract. There is actually over par, but at the same time, they will not stay forever. There's a high turnover, as I said before, and also they tend to use part-time, they tend to use different arrangements, and so on and so forth. They also have surges in employment around the big Amazon moments, but that does not stay, that does not build development. Italy is peculiar because it is the only country in which there is an agreement between the trade unions and the subcontractors in the transportation sector, which was introduced in 2022, beyond my period of study, but which has changed things partially for those subcontractors in the transportation sector that follow the agreement. As you rightly said as well, the use of cooperatives is widespread, particularly in the transportation sector, not so much anymore in the logistics sector, because Amazon wants to bring those things in-house and at the same time optimally, algorithmically control the subcontractors in transportation. In fact, the agreement is quite interesting. Finally, about development, I think your question was about development. Does Amazon bring development? Because yeah, it can bring fast jobs, maybe, as we saw, but it does not bring development, I think, overall, because it does not bring innovation. That stays where Amazon is from. Right. Right.
Next one is Sarah Cassem, presenting a paper titled "The Digital Labor Market of AI: The Case of Amazon Mechanical Turk Workers." The floor is yours.
Yeah, I just need to. Could you help me find the full screen? There we are. Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for coming to our panel. We're going to shift our attention a little bit. It's still related to Amazon, but a different platform of Amazon. In today's conference, discussing really the intermingling of technology and labor, I thought this was a good opportunity to discuss some of the workers behind the development here of algorithms and AI, essentially. So today I'm going to discuss the case of Amazon Mechanical Turk, a different platform here. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. So in recent years, I think there's been more attention than previously on the workers behind AI. And these can be workers, as we know, that are quite spread out around the world. In today's presentation, I want to discuss how technology and algorithms become embedded in the process of work itself in this labor market, and what are the consequences here, focusing on labor organization, because essentially labor organization should mean that the conditions should be better for workers. And what I will argue throughout this presentation is that we have this case of more algorithmic management being embedded in laboring, and at the same time, this platform has enabled and created, in a way, or exploited a global workforce that is built on precarious conditions, and that this means that traditional forms of organizing to improve the working conditions are not possible to actually detect in that way, and that we have to change the way we look at labor organization altogether. To do so, I will start at the first step, which is, what is Amazon Mechanical Turk? What is it like working on Amazon Mechanical Turk? So focusing here on, let's say, the working conditions and so forth, and then taking a step back and connecting that to the labor organizing at Mechanical Turk. So Amazon Mechanical Turk, as I will discuss, is an online platform that brings together people to do online tasks. To access this labor market, because it's exclusively digitally, this means you can't, as a researcher, approach it by going into the field. The field is digital, which means that you can access it by, posing yourself as a worker on Amazon Mechanical Turk and working tasks, as well as conducting surveys on this platform to reach the workers. Now, when I asked the workers, why do you do this kind of work? It doesn't pay very highly. One worker, for instance, said, I can work when I want and not work when I want. So I want to start with that because these platforms, as we know, bring the promise of flexibility, or at least they claim to do so. Now, when we look at the platform economy, I think it is important to distinguish what kind of platform we're talking about. And I think we cover a range here in today's in our panel today. Platforms can be both location-based and web-based. Location-based is what Jacopo just discussed, an Amazon warehouse. It is tied to a specific context in which it exists that comes with its own consequences. Then we have web-based. This is where Amazon Mechanical Turk comes in. The location is irrelevant where the worker is. At the same time, we have workers that are paid a traditional wage. By that, I mean, you know how much money you're going to approximately make actually at the end of the month versus gig workers. Think here of the delivery workers and so forth. And Amazon Mechanical Turk brings these two worlds together now because it's based on, it's part of the gig economy, but in this case, it's web-based. Oh no, that was, sorry. Nope. Yeah, I got it now. Okay. So this is a screenshot of how Amazon Mechanical Turk sells itself to the businesses, let's say. It says, here's an access to a global labor market 24/7, which means, and one of the researchers says that the sun never sets on Amazon's digital labor market, essentially. They sell themselves as, you can outsource tasks. And actually, Amazon Mechanical Turk started as a platform for Amazon itself, connected to the warehouses. It wanted to eliminate, for example, duplicates on its website. So it started by outsourcing, then it created this platform for its own internal use, and now in the early 2000s has opened it up to everybody, really. And it says that this is a chance to harness collective intelligence. And it makes this link saying in the second paragraph, while technology continues to improve, there are still many things that humans can do much more effectively than computers. Interestingly enough, they do frame themselves as, but we're great actually for AI, because these are human beings that can help you in collecting data, in labeling data, and annotating data. Now, what do these tasks look like? First of all, Amazon calls these tasks human intelligence tasks. So you are literally doing this work only on the basis of being a human being. It can be anything. For example, digitizing receipts. You have a picture of a receipt and you have to type in the numbers. You might watch a video and it will ask you, how did that video make you feel? It could also be that it shows you a series of pictures and asks you, where is the instrument in these pictures? So really, you can, as you work these tasks, you really feel, okay, I'm only doing this because I'm a human being and I can differentiate here. Now, Amazon Mechanical Turk as a name, and I always say, to me, this is fascinating that they were able to come up with this. It refers to the Mechanical Turk. That's what we see in this picture here. This refers in turn to the 18th century automaton created by von Kaplan, where we're talking about the Ottoman Empire times. So this was the Orientalist conception of who the Turk was at the time. And you have to imagine this as a closed table, actually. And at the top, there's a chessboard. Now, this robot pretty much was touring the world, playing against people like Napoleon, chess, and was winning. In reality, there was actually a human being sitting inside, moving the chess pieces. And this is the name that Amazon chose because they say we are artificial intelligence, because behind, obviously, the AI, there's the human beings. Now, it's really important to take a look at the platform interactions we have here. What Amazon is doing here, similar to the warehouses, it's providing the infrastructure. So there is this, they're providing the mTurk website, essentially, and it provides the market. You can be what they call a requester. You're coming with these tasks, and the tasks can be that they need 1,000 people, 5,000 people to complete these tasks, to have enough data to know this is really a guitar and not a cat. And the people posting these tasks can be
everybody. Unfortunately, universities have been some of the top clients for Amazon and have been some of the ones paying the worst wages actually over the years to do surveys. You have also huge companies like Coca-Cola. At the same time, it's also great for startups because you're clearly cutting on costs by going to the digitally outsourced labor force. The Amazon Mechanical Turk worker is clearly not an employee of Amazon, neither Amazon nor the company or the person that is posting the task. So it's a very classic case of the platform economy. What does it look like working on it? So I will log in as a worker. I'm completely anonymized, series of letters and names, letters and numbers, and I find a task. The task itself can also be anonymized. So I might be doing something for, let's say, Coca-Cola, but I don't even know it's Coca-Cola. This becomes quite relevant with specific tasks that you feel like are also related to collecting intelligence, like identifying things at a border, for instance. So there's been a lot of question marks. So I would find the task that I want to work. I have to qualify for it. I complete the task, I submit it, and then the task either gets approved or rejected. Now, the interesting thing here is, as someone doing this task, I am an independent contractor. I have no right over, let's say, the intellectual property of it. So once I submit the task, the employer, the person posting the task, can use my work, even if they say, I reject it, I will not pay you. And based on this, then you receive an approval rating. So it's pretty much like we see on Uber, where the driver will receive stars. Now, what does this mean, going back to the question of technology and algorithmic management here? On the one hand, it's clear that the work that you are doing is particularly important for the development of algorithms and AI. And algorithms become embedded. So the process itself is, to a huge extent, mediated through algorithmic management. This concept of you never meeting your boss, but now you are also someone, maybe somewhere on the opposite end of this globe, who does not even have a grasp, because they can also anonymize themselves, who the boss even is in this sense. Sometimes algorithms are also used to mass approve or mass reject tasks. So it means also an algorithm could be the one denying you your wage in that case, and it tracks the time that you need to complete these tasks. The reason the approval rating is so important is the higher the rating, the more tasks you conduct, the more you have access to tasks that pay you higher, because tasks on Amazon Mechanical Turk can be as low as 1 cent, and you want to reach the tasks that pay $5, that pay $10. At the same time, there's a clear importance of the technology here when it comes to the labor market itself, because now you're competing against anyone, anywhere in the world. All you need is a device by which you can access the internet to work on this labor market. And this comes with its own racialized and gendered division of labor, meaning with Amazon Mechanical Turk, people are predominantly located in India and in the US that complete these tasks. But by and large, when it comes to this digital labor market, we know that those posting the tasks tend to be in this part of the world, and those completing the tasks tend to be in the global south. And this also can lead to a further race to the bottom if we're going to talk about wages, because obviously with the currency exchange rates, it means something different for different people. At the same time, the question is, who is completing this task? This is really, I would say, important to look at specific case studies, because in some cases, the work is done from home, which we know, where we know that it has been combined with care work, which is predominantly done by women, as we know historically. So it means that a woman in this case who is taking care of an elderly person is doing the work at home and at the same time doing a task here and there. So there are implications there on these levels as well. Now, what does this mean then with this entanglement of technology when it comes to organizing? I'd like to read another quote of a worker where they say, "We are real people with real needs trying to make a living." Whenever we talk about technology, I always find it important to bring back the discussion to workers' being human beings, because it helps us understand also what are their needs for better work. Now, given that this moves away so much from what has been traditional work in many ways, it means that traditional ways of organizing are impeded. In other words, the leverage that a worker would traditionally have doesn't exist in that way. I, as a worker, number one, it makes no sense for me, for example, to resist by giving wrong answers. The algorithm will filter me out. It will say, Sarah provided wrong answers, she's not getting paid. At the same time, it also doesn't make any sense to work slower as resistance because I'm being timed. At the same time, I don't have a common labor, well, I don't have a common place of work where I can talk with others, where we can say, let's organize a strike. Because the workforce is global. It's working around the clock, and it's based on gig wages in the end. So if we decide not to work, someone else will, and they will never know that I went on strike. This is now a big difference to, let's say, the rest of the gig economy, because it doesn't mean that people don't go on strike in the gig economy. We've seen this with food delivery workers, for example. So the factor of location can play quite an important role. Given that they're independent contractors, they are not considered and classified as workers to begin with. Then it means also even what is a worker depends on where you are in the globe. What are your labor rights even? Do you have a legal right to join a union? This is even a question to start with. And it's a whole other conversation when it comes to collective bargaining agreements. So what does this mean? Does it mean workers do not organize? No, they do. But it's different to the ways that we have been, let's say, used to over history. Given that you don't come together on even a digital common workplace, the organizing happens outside of it through forms of digital solidarity. This is both created through new spaces and new tools, as well as existing spaces. The important, let's say, denominator here is that technology is actually repurposed by the workers for their interests. What are, let's say, practical examples or concrete examples? We have something called Turk-Opticon, which has become now a workers-led nonprofit, initially created by researchers saying, we want to flip the panopticon on its head. On Amazon Mechanical Turk, workers get rated. Now it's time that those who post the tasks get rated. So it's a completely different space where workers can come together and say, since they're anonymized, in many cases, the requesters, they can say, person X, does not pay, actually. They will reject your tasks. So as you can see here on the bars, basically, you get, I see it as solidarity because you're giving each other a heads up. Do not accept a task from this person, but accept it from that person. There's also been tools created since the approval rating is so important. This is a tool, for example, of how many tasks do I have to work and get approved to reach a specific percentage to have access to better tasks. Existing spaces are, for example, Reddit. If you go on Reddit and just type in Amazon Mechanical Turk, there's a massive community there that is built on giving each other advice on tips and tricks, how to set up alerts, for example, for these higher paying tasks, that you're not sitting there doing all these 1 cent tasks. So to basically wrap this all up, I would say, as a researcher, that it's important to really always go behind the screen and understand the realities here, because this is the only way we can create sustainable regulation to begin with, but also important, I would say, for labor organizing now and in the future is the usage of technology, to repurpose the usage of technology here. So on one hand, we have technology creating new precarious labor markets that are global in nature here, where both algorithms are embedded in the labor process and at the same time being workers that work for the labor market of AI. But at the same time, we see then, okay, this poses challenges in traditional organizing, but perhaps opens up new avenues for how workers organize. On that, I'd like to thank you.
Many thanks, Sarah, and by the way, many thanks to you all for attending this session. So a little bit, as you said when you commented Jacopo, I think that the interdisciplinary nature of this section and in general of the discussion we are having is super important. And in the case of your work, having a granular sociological and very detailed view of what we are talking about. So what these firms truly are, how labor relationships are shaped and organized is crucial, in particular for economists that many times, in order to have a quantitative analysis, tend to neglect important information about how the phenomenon is shaped. So I think that this is the right way to go. And so thank you also for being here. Second point, I mean, this is again a kind of congratulation in the sense that examining the internal documents and how the firm sells to the external is another very important thing, another element of heterogeneity that we tend to neglect, while it is crucial also to understand how strategically the firm behave and the kind of relationship both with other firms and, of course, with the labor force. Then, more specific comments. I think it can be useful as a way to even increase the value of your work and the way of generalizing it externally, to identify some kind of similarities with other sectors like agriculture, the construction industry, where you have this kind of mediators, so to say, who tend to organize and sell a labor force which is in a very bad condition concerning vulnerability, fragility, no access to unions and this kind of stuff. So it could be interesting to see which are the differences with digitalization of this kind of situation that, however, if you go outside shops where constructions material are sold here, even here in Rome, you will find persons selling de facto labor force or intermediating for that. Then another point, because I mean, Amazon is not only a let's say controller and seller of a semi-slaved labor force in the digital realm. It's also, for example, one of the oligopolies selling artificial intelligence services to other firms. And we know that these artificial intelligence services have behind lots of human labor, as Antonio Casilli and yourself also told us. So it could be also interesting to broaden the picture and to see a kind of parallel movement as far as firms become growing demander of artificial intelligence services, which Amazon is one of the monopolistic seller. At the same time, it increases the mass of labor, which is very much exploited and which is directly related to this artificial intelligence services. So I think this is an interesting kind of intermingling of relationships. On the kind of value supply chain perspective that we can have with respect to the things you told us, I think it could also be interesting to see to what extent the different type of micro or digital workers, like the ones that you told us about, are in a different position if you go and compare those who are in the US and perhaps pursue more sophisticated tasks, those who are in Uganda or in Kenya or in Venezuela doing very elementary tasks and perhaps being paid less. So it is also interesting to see if there is a kind of hierarchy and different platforms and firms, also, let's say, those at which Amazon externalize tasks. The just final word, I don't want to be too much pessimistic. However, we have also to acknowledge that the recent experience about attempt to organize both offline, so think at the movements of riders, and as well as online, have not been so successful. So I think we should also ask ourselves to what extent these are really roads to try to fix some of those problems, or if the imbalance of power is too strong.
I wanted to ask you just, I mean, labor power sometimes is built around skill. Organization develops out of so big places like the two DIGITECON, like places where workers can privately exchange trade and knowledge. Does this materialize sometimes in Amazon Mechanical Turk, or is it too individualistic? So in the end, I mean, the most let's say the most skilled worker cannot organize. Is skill even something that can be considered in a context like Amazon Mechanical Turk, or the tasks are too basic?
Yes. Yeah. So my question was not really, I mean, it's kind of a curiosity. So recently, from when generative AI became like so spread, like in any kind of application. So I know, like, since I'm working in artificial intelligence, I know that like people, I mean, even my colleagues, they're starting to use data set labeled with generative AI instead of human people, like Amazon Mechanical Turkers. So I was wondering, is this like getting an issue? Like, because at this point, just not thinking about like the quality of data that is labeled from generative AI instead of human people, that of course is not comparable, but just for Amazon Mechanical Turkers, would that be like a real issue? Like it's kind of, they will lose their job, even this very precarious job or whatever. I don't know if you have thought or know something about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dario, for the questions. I know that I think today my conclusion is that from the outside, I appear as a sociologist. I welcome that. I come from a political science background, actually, and no. I embrace that because I think our work is interdisciplinary. And I think the questions that you raised also are avenues for me to bring back the political and the political economics. So I definitely welcome the suggestions that you've brought. And I find it also fascinating to, yes, the digital labor market is important, but actually what makes it so exciting is we can see parallels outside of it. And the implications here can be important elsewhere and vice versa. For example, comparing the US, something in the global north with something in the global south, the ILO actually has done really cool research where they really clearly show that the median wage, hourly wage, is substantially different for a worker in the US versus a worker in India, because the person posting the task comes also, I would say, with a rather racial conceptions of people where they will limit some tasks to, I only want workers from country X. So it means that certain tasks, to be able to have access to it, it depends where my geographical location is, and that this can be substantial. In terms of materializing back, let's say, to Mechanical Turk, it's really interesting because Turk Opticon has been around for years. And recently, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Mechanical Turk introduced a new feature, which is that now officially on the Mechanical Turk, you can see what the full rating of the requester is. I'm sure that Amazon would say they came up with this, but I would actually put some question marks because sometimes we do see a spillover effect, I would say, happening there. And to your question, Clara, I think that's a really important question and brings me back to what we've discussed also before. I don't think generative AI is competing yet with Mechanical Turk, because actually it still depends so much on these workers. You know, if you ask ChatGPT anything that is what we would call even resembling some subjective thing, it will tell you, I cannot comment on this, right? Whereas Mechanical Turk, these are people to identify human emotions. And for that to work, to spill back over to ChatGPT, for example, you still need enough data. So the interesting and contradictory thing is that at the end of the day, though, these workers are contributing, though, to their own replacement here by AI. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So the next presenter is Clara.
Clara Plonzi. She's a mathematician. She comes from Scuola Normale Superiore, and she's presenting a work together with me and Dario titled "Platform Worker Not by Chance." A machine learning approach to digital labor markets.
We are already running out of time. So.
Yes. Okay, but you present the first slide, so it's okay. Can just go fast. Yeah. So hi everybody. Thanks. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. I was a bit worried to present today here because it's the first time I talked not to mathematicians or computer scientists. So I will probably say something like wrong for you. So you can ask me questions or you can stop me. It's fine. But I will try to be like not a computer scientist, like too much. I will just go fast. So of course I will give a very short introduction because I think, I think you can like know the context much better than I do. So the general context is that it's digital labor platforms, and of which Amazon, both in the logistics sector and Amazon Mechanical Turk, are just like two examples. And the idea here is that we have a system where there is a automatic system, like an algorithms that manage and the matching between work and service, so it put in contact clients and workers. And as Sarah was saying before, this can happen both on location and also completely online. And this is actually something that is bringing an alternative, like new job opportunities, and it's also offering. It is shaping itself as something that can be positive in some sense, like offering flexible time management or also like easy access to the platform, to the job market actually. But at the same time, what is emerging as well is that there's a lot of precarity in this kind of jobs, as it was perfectly like explained before. And this is something that it's still under study, and I guess there are already many evidences about it, but also this is also like evolving pretty fast, and also recently, because this kind of innovation, like the algorithms that are also evolving a lot. So the idea here was that of trying to use some more advanced computational methods like machine learning to try to uncover some patterns that are cannot be easily recognized from like linear statistical methods, I guess. So this is what I tried to do. And this was for the Italian case, like digital labor market. And this was the aim of the study. And the research questions are basically three. The first one is just answer the question, who are the digital platform workers in Italy? And the second and third are actually two predictive models. I will explain you like in a second how I modeled them. And so the second was to compare platform workers to the general other non-standard employment, and how do they differ. And the last research question was about how platform work can be used by unemployed as an alternative actually to the traditional job market. And as I was saying, the methods we use are like based on machine learning. And the reason for this choice is what I was saying, so that like the idea was to try to get patterns that are not easily discovered. And also, but not only, of course, with machine learning, you can also rely on some like data-driven discovery, so not only based on some hypotheses we already know that are given, like accepted like that, but also like something that was not expected before, so we can discover something new just emerging from data. And that, of course, has to be assessed as well. But and on top of this, since machine learning models can seem to be like very like strong and robust sometimes, but sometimes it's not easy to interpret how they come out with their results. I also added in the machine learning pipeline some methods that are called explainable AI, and that are just like additional steps in the pipeline where the scope is to just give an explanation of why the machine learning model output exactly that result. And I will give you an example just to show how. So for the methodology, so as I said, I had 3 different research questions, and they are completely independent, but they are all based on the same machine learning pipeline that is the same in any case. I'll just catch it here just in case you don't know it. Like the first step is data preparation. We take data and clean it and select the features and like find missing values and so on. And when we have a clean data set, we build a model, and which is like the most crucial, not the most crucial, but is also a crucial part, where we select the algorithms to use. And usually here is like, I don't choose one. I take a few of them that I think are can be give a good result, and then I just evaluate them to get the most stable one. And then I train them, evaluate it, and then I deploy it on some like new data to check how the model perform and then interpret on this part. And so this is the general thing. And the data we used is the INAPP Plus survey for the Italian context. This is the 2021 edition. And this is particularly interesting because it has like a lot of variables inside it, and I mean, it gives a very global view of what the individuals are in, let's say. And of course, this is a data set of people, not fear. Maybe later there will be another presentation. And it includes both employed people, unemployed, and of different age and gender and different background. And it is relevant for this study because it has a section that is specifically on the gig economy. And so we have this is a very large data set, but inside this very large data set, there is a small subsample of digital platform workers. And this is the data set on which I actually based the analysis. And another interesting feature of this dataset is that it provides data is aggregated by like intersectional attributes. So it is actually possible to also run some analysis based on gender, age, place of origin, or other intersectional categories, so that we can even try to differentiate like inequalities between within and between these groups. And we try to do it a little bit, but I will tell you later the limitations. And by the way, these are the as I was saying, for each research question, I had a different pipeline, and that was based on different sample variables, machine learning algorithm, and of course interpretation model. I will not go into details. I will just to give you a very broad idea. Like the first one is a clustering analysis that is an unsupervised machine learning method, where actually you just feed the data to the algorithms without giving it any like label or whatever, and we just check what it finds. That in this case is like groups of people. Yeah. In the second and third research questions are instead predictive models, supervised ones, and they are binary classification. And in this case, what happens is that we have we take our subset, we divide it into train and test. So on the train set, we train the model on the first, let's say, subsection, and we give it label. And so we hope that the machine learn from those labels how to classify like who is a platform worker and who is not a platform worker. And then we check it how if it really learned by evaluating it on another test that really fit it without the labels. But yeah, that is not so important maybe. And so what about the results instead? So for the first research question, that was the cluster analysis I was telling you. The idea here was to check whether the digital platform workers in Italy are like one homogeneous group or not, and if not, how they can be characterized. And we found that these differ, first of all, based on if they are employed or not employed. So the employed means that they are people like that declare to have a main employment in the traditional market, but then they also supplement their income in the platform. Whereas the unemployed are those that are declared to be not employed anywhere, but they at the same time they work on digital platform. And it is interesting because even they do that, they do not consider that as a official employment. And so what we found is that for the employed, there are three main groups, and for the unemployed, there are two. And so there is no time, I guess, to go into the details, but what is interesting is that in both cases, these clusters are based mainly on both demographic and let's say socioeconomic status, and also this interwent a lot with their dependence on the platform. So, for example, maybe I can in the example of the unemployed, like let's say there are these two groups that are actually pretty. They have a very different semantic, let's say. Like the first group, the one that says high dependence, high dependence on the platform. This is mainly composed of like adult men, with children and care responsibility, and they have actually severe economic problem, let's say. And what they do is like they use the work on the platform as an essential income for their life, let's say. But still, it seems like it's not enough, because what the survey revealed is that these people still are in high economic vulnerability. While the other group, the low dependence one, that are those that declare that they just do it not for as a priority. They are actually young people that seems like they use it mostly as a way to enter in the labor market, while they are still like maybe studying, or they are still looking for a job, or like they don't have usually like prior experience. So for the second research question, this was the comparison of digital platform workers with non-standard employment. So here what I did is like I took the whole subsample of non-standard employees, and then I just asked the model to say who is a platform worker and who is not. And what I show here, I don't know if it's easy to understand, maybe not, but what is ranked here are the features of the data set that were considered to be the most important for predicting if a person in this case is a digital platform worker or not. And they are ranked based on this SHAP value that is actually just a number that signifies how much that feature contributes to the prediction. And so there will be many things to say, but like among the most predictive features in this case are surely the contract category. Like it seems like many people with a part-time permanent contract are actually very prone to enter the digital platform market. And the fact about education is very in line with other previous studies. It's like it seems like it's but maybe a bit more, because like here we not only found that people with a bachelor degree are higher probability of entering platform work, but also those that already have an employment, and this employment like is a highly specialized profession, like intellectual activity or scientific activity. But what is most interesting in this case, I think, is the relationship with the COVID-19 pandemic, because it seems like this is a very highly predictive feature, in the sense that probably compared to other non-standard worker, that was like the pandemic was a kind of prompt to enter into the digital platform. And indeed, what we can see from these scatter plots is that that the people who receive income support for COVID, either, I mean, there are on both sides, there are either income support or bonus that are both public support given for people in difficulties because of COVID. Like those that you see on top of the dotted orange line are those that are predicted to be digital platform workers. And here it's very clear that those who receive this kind of income supports are exactly the digital platform workers. And for the last research question, that was the comparison of between digital, I mean, not a comparison, like to say between all people that are unemployed. In this case, I only focused on job seekers that were below 50 years old. Like in this subpopulation, who are those that decide to enter the digital platform market? And in this case, what we find is that actually there are some demographic factors that are pretty influent. And this was not the case in the previous one. And of course, other economic needs, of course. But maybe I can show you. Yeah, like for the demographic, I found this one, and that is also very in line with the other previous studies. I would say, like being like men are more prone to enter the platform labor, and also people in a low age range. Like in this case, the most predictive one was the one from 25 to 29. And another interest, for this case study, one last interesting feature is that it seems like the digital platform workers among the job seekers are those that were previously employed but that actually lost their job because of like unforeseen condition facts. Like they didn't decide to, I mean, it's not because their contract ended, but something else happened, like they were very unsatisfied about their job, or just that, I don't know, they were just fired in some sense. And this was interesting because it confirmed some qualitative studies that INAPP was also conducting, like with some interviews with digital platform workers that actually were saying the same thing, like they were unsatisfied about their previous job experience in the traditional labor market, and that's why they decided to enter the digital platform economy, let's say. And even more, because of this, they were even less concerned about the precarity that is actually in the digital platform. And so to conclude, I just wanted to point out some limitations to this study, that since this is based on completely on machine learning algorithms, I have to say that everything is based on the quality of the results are just start from the quality of the data. So we'll point out the issues in the data. And I have to, as I was mentioning, the pool of digital platform workers here was actually very small, and especially very imbalanced with respect to the other categories, like subpopulations I was comparing them to. And so I managed to get some, I think it was robust, but of course can be improved. And also another thing we realized is that there might be like a misrepresentation of digital platform workers, because I mean, it was kind of strange that there were very few people that were not Italian among this, and we know that from other studies that, like in Italy, it's there are lots of migrants that use digital economy as for their labor. And to fix that, like the new direction would be, of course, to find some additional data sources. Maybe in the next INAPP Plus survey will also be helping, or other way we are looking for that. And from my side, just to conclude, another interesting direction for me would be to study how the algorithm management that is below, like underneath these digital platforms, actually impact the working condition of these workers. Because, okay, they're digital platforms, and I mean, actually the algorithms are not all the same, and this, of course, can impact a lot. And I mean, so we can also work on changing the algorithms and not only the working condition of people, I think. And yeah, let's see. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Clara. Thank you all for this very interesting session. I would say just a few things. The first is that I really appreciated the study because it challenges this idea of the platform economy, of platform work, or something really homogeneous, which is an idea that despite the increasing empirical literature on platform work is still very mainstream and dominant in the debate, I guess. And also it challenges the idea that platform work and the platform labor market is a peripheral island in the broader labor market. And I particularly appreciated the idea of comparing platform work with other kind of non-standard works and employment, and this is very interesting. What I was thinking is that maybe this analysis may be replicated on a sectoral scale in the platform economy, like trying to understand the heterogeneity of workers in each sector of the platform economy, because we know that, for instance, people working with Uber and people working with food deliveries may be different on their heterogeneity in terms of socio-demographic variables. For instance, the initial investment that you have to do in order to become an Uber driver is completely different than the initial investment that you need to access the food delivery labor market. So I will replicate this analysis on a sectoral scale also to assess if within sectors of the platform economy there is some heterogeneity in this respect. And the last thing that I would say tries to make a link with the discussion that we had before with Sarah's presentation in terms of like the implications of the heterogeneity in terms of organizing and political processes of giving voice to workers and so on. Because what I think is that this research remarks and highlights that from this kind of heterogeneity layers in terms of social demographic skills and so on, we could also hypothesize that people living in different conditions in this market may have different interests. And this is a great challenge, in my opinion, in order to organize this labor force, because we always start from the assumption that the main constraint to organize this labor force is the spatial dispersion and fragmentation. But the fragmentation in terms of the social trajectories of these people who access this labor market, I think, is also a challenge, and we should make, I think, a more reflexive effort in this way, trying to understand from which social position these people are participating in this labor market, and if they really recognize themselves as similar in terms, at least in social condition, and if they are willing to organize in this sense.
So 1 minute to reply, and then I propose to do a change in the audience. So Francesco, you will present, even because your work is very much related to Pietman and Dario, which is why I will close very fast. Okay, Clara. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the questions and comments that were like very pertinent. Actually, for the first thing you were saying, like about the sectoral analysis, I didn't do that because there were very few individuals for each group. But actually, something that I noticed is that did I wrote it here? Well, maybe No, I didn't write it. But yeah, in these groups, actually there was also division based on, okay, I couldn't do like the exact sector, but like in some groups it emerged that the people in the group were mostly doing activity online or activity location based. So there was already like a kind of idea, or like, okay, this is the rider groups and this is the mechanical Turks group. So that was, but yeah, of course, but we need more data to do that. And for the social trajectory, yeah, that was actually maybe a bit mirrored in the last research question, like why people decide to enter in the digital platform. And it would be cool, I think, to get like more data also about their like opinion about it, because otherwise we cannot really guess. Yeah, also, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, these are like really interesting research direction, I would say.
Work which has been already published, and the title is Imbricated to Platforms, the Reproduction of Differences in Food Delivery Work. Very fast.
Yes, this work has been published in the Italian Journal of Science and Technology Studies, which is called Tecnoscienza. I don't know if you are familiar with science and technology studies, but my work is highly based on this theoretical framework. So this is the paper. Così.
I think because this is a PowerPoint, so we do not have other possibilities. I will.
Okay. So the idea behind this paper comes from my PhD research, which was a PhD research on food delivery work. I'm a sociologist, and this research was largely an ethnographic research, which I conducted between 2020 and 21 in Milan. And for several months, for at least 7 months, I worked as a food delivery worker with Platform Glovo, and I also enter in contact with so many workers doing interviews. I will delve a little bit more in the methodological part in the next slides. And so the idea behind this specific paper is to unpack what I would call a digital cage paradox in this debate, because we have already talked today about algorithmic management, and in this debate there is both the idea that algorithms are a new software of technical control, very pervasive compared to previous means of technological control, and this technological control deprives people and workers with their autonomy and agency and so on. But on the other hand, we also have an increasing literature on the way people try to resist and rework technologies, as also Sarah was mentioning before. So my idea with this paper was trying to unpack this dichotomic view of algorithmic management and algorithmic resistance, and trying to understand the duality of this process and the way how people, by interacting with these platforms, reproduce the differences and the heterogeneity of the workforce. So the debate on algorithmic management in the platform economy, because I mean algorithms populate very different work contexts, but here we are talking about digital platforms, is largely founded on the labor process theory, which is a Marxist theory of work and labor process.
which stems from this pivotal article by Alessandro Gagnini, who argued that platforms are the new digital base point of production, meaning the place where the labor process is enacted upon workers, where processes of capital accumulation occurs, and where algorithms enforce a kind of managerial control on workers by partially automating the decision-making process. And so algorithms, as we also saw in the presentation of Jacopo, are replicating a kind of neo-Taylorism and digital Taylorism in this respect. And the empirical literature on algorithmic control in digital labor platform actually highlights that algorithmic opacity produces information asymmetries which weakens labor powers vis-a-vis the platform power. And also that this kind of regime of control is complicated by the fact that it's a kind of multi-stakeholder management where also other users act as manager de facto. I'm thinking about clients in particular, and creating, fragmenting, so the workplace conflicts also with respect of the client. On the other hand, as I was anticipating before, there is an increasing debate on the way people try to resist, workers try to resist to this algorithmic control. In the literature, we find now many definitions in this respect. So algorithmic resistance, algo-activism, which is one of the most prominent one, and is defined as a set of emerging tactics through which workers are individually and collectively resisting algorithmic control. In the empirical literature, we find very much examples of what this algorithmic resistance actually is. We talk about non-cooperation, so the strategies through which workers try to defy algorithmic instruction, for instance, rejecting job tasks, which is also the practice that I will delve on in this presentation. Disobeying algorithmic recommendations, or this intermediating of the platform. This is particularly visible in freelance platform, where people try to get clients out of the platforms in order to avoid to pay the transaction fee and so on. Another strategy is data obfuscation, which has to do with anticipatory tactics to manipulate algorithmic decision into the workers' favor, but also the use of bots or external software aimed at optimizing job performances. And then within this umbrella term of algorithms, we also have processes of collective organizing and food delivery workers, and food delivery work is the most typical example of experiences of organizing, also because, and this goes to the direction of what Sarah was saying before, because food delivery workers work in the physical space and they can encounter each other and recognize each other and try to organize themselves. So in this literature, I find some blind spots, and the main one is that there is a kind of homogenization of the workforce, meaning that workers are presumed to being able to resist algorithms, everyone in the same way, with the same resources and with the same capabilities. There is also a generalized idea of algorithms, and this is due to a lack of comparative studies, at least when it comes to qualitative studies. There is a lack of comparative studies between different platforms, and so algorithms has become this monster against which workers are willing, or we are forcing them somehow to resist, but we don't have a precise idea of the difference between these algorithms in different platforms. And there is also a scant regard of the implication of algorithmic resistance, both at the individual level and at the collective level, at the organizational level, meaning are these tactics actually effective? Are these tactics that are usually performed on individual basis able to produce organizational implication and collective effects. And there is also another theorization of the role of workers' agency vis-a-vis algorithms, which reproduces, in my opinion, a kind of dichotomy between a deterministic assumption of the role of technology and a voluntarism on behalf of the worker. So my research questions here that I try to answer in this paper is, first, how do different platforms configure working conditions in their digital architecture? So trying to understand how, by virtue of processes of technological configurations, platforms configure different working conditions in the app that people and workers are using during their work. And the second question is on the other way around: how do workers with different skills and sociocultural backgrounds engage with these platforms, and particularly with the aim of trying to capture how people using the same platform do their work in different ways? So I will skip this part maybe because it's highly theoretical and it risks to bother you. But this is the methodology. As I said, this research was particularly rooted in participant observation, during which I worked as a food delivery worker. I complemented it with 21 in-depth interviews with food delivery riders, a survey with 130 riders that I will not touch in this presentation, interviews with other actors, and a walkthrough analysis of the food delivery app in order to decode the script of the app and the working condition that are encoded in the app. This is the organizational model of food delivery platforms, meaning that this is a kind of hierarchical model of organizing where you do not have a clear hierarchical structure between these three actors that participate in the process of production. And in this organizational model, algorithms operate as calculative agents in the way they coordinate partially dispersed actors in the city, so riders, restaurants, and the clients. Each of these actors is endowed with a kind of flexibility, meaning that to a certain extent, riders can decide when to work, when to accept the deliveries that are offered them. Restaurants can decide when they can turn off their iPads, their tablets, and so on. And clients can decide always when they want to order the food, or they are flexible as well. But as Liz Richardson observed, this kind of flexibility is actually a coercive flexibility, because to limit this flexibility, platforms encode in the digital architecture and in the app used by food delivery workers a set of constraints that do not allow them to actually being that flexible. And if we do a kind of walkthrough analysis of these apps, we actually see that these working conditions and these constraints are different between platforms. For example, in food delivery work, here I compared Deliveroo and Levrero, so two different platforms. We see that in Deliveroo, the reputational system is symmetric, meaning that workers have the possibility to give ratings and review also to clients. And in Levrero, this is asymmetric, meaning that food delivery workers cannot give a review of the clients. In terms of high demand hours requirements, Deliveroo force riders to be present during certain time of the week, for example, during Friday and Saturday evening. But for a delivery worker, it's mandatory only to be online, to log in on the platform, while on the other hand, Glovo riders have to complete a certain number of deliveries during these working hours. And also, and this is the most important difference, food delivery riders can always reject automatically the orders that are assigned to them, while Glovo riders can automatically reject maximum 5 orders per day. Otherwise, they have to chat, to type in the chat with the assistants, asking manually to get reassigned their orders. And from this interview excerpt, we can see how the properties, the material properties encoded in these different apps lead workers to incorporate different work disposition and to do this work in a different way. These riders say, I wasn't a rider who used to select orders. I didn't learn this habit because Glovo didn't give you this instruction. Glovo didn't enable you to reject an order and to, I didn't put it in this slide, but I also found a difference in terms of the income that these food delivery workers can gain from this platform. And it clearly shows that people rejecting at least one order per day have they gain much more income compared to people who always accept the orders that are assigned to them. But this slide shows that by using the app, by using the digital properties of the app, people learn to do their work in a different way. And how much time I have? 1 minute. Okay. On the other way around, I also try to understand how people use differently the same platform. This is the first part of my ethnographic research, during which I spent 3 months with a group of migrant workers with migrant backgrounds, usually from sub-Saharan countries. And these workers demonstrated a kind of reactive disposition towards the platform that is clearly visible in the practice of accepting each orders that was assigned to them. So there is not here a kind of capabilities of actually understanding when an order is a good order, when an order must be reassigned, and so there is not, to go back to the discussion on algorithmic resistance, a capacity to resist algorithmic decision-making. On the other hand, what I encountered this second group of food delivery workers, which were Italian workers with more sociocultural skills. I have to banalize now, but I would add more details if you want later. But the point is that this group that is more socialized to the Italian culture, let's say, the Italian living and so on, we are more able to turn platform material properties in productive affordances. Productive affordances meaning that I find some properties that is encoded in the app script and I use it in my favor in order to practice my work in a different way, in a more proficient way. And so to conclude, this paper tries to show that food delivery apps have different digital properties that prefigure riders' work practice in different ways, limiting or enhancing their agencies. But on the other way, also that riders with socioeconomic and cultural different socioeconomic backgrounds engage with the same food delivery platform in different ways. And this is the last thing that I do not, however, understand this strategic implication, this strategic attitude toward the platform as a way of actually resistance algorithmic control, because it often reproduces the organizational logics that underlie platform algorithmic management. So refusing a job task in order to get a better one reproduces the meritocratic logic underlying algorithmic management, and potentially also lead to anti-solidaristic consequence, because it means that I'm taking off work opportunities to my other colleagues. That's it.
We'll skip the discussion. I should have discussed it, and we can talk in the lunch break. But if there are raised the lunch, just I want to emphasize that Francesco was doing an ethnographic work, so he was studying delivery, and this was why so much detail, even the strategies of other projects in reacting the algorithm although in different ways. So I mean, it worked for 7 months, I guess.
It's interesting that now we're talking about dependency of firms, and as firms sometimes they will employ strategies to resist platforms very much the same way.
Yes.
Okay, so what I promise to you is that I will try to keep it in 10 minutes. So I don't steal anything of your lunchtime. I think one of the great things of this session is that we are really looking at platforms from different, I would say, relevant perspectives and angles. This is a joint work with Jacopo Valeria, that you know, and with Donato Cutolo and Martin Kenny. What we do here is trying to look at the impact of digital platforms on labor, but focusing on firms. Why? Well, because in many sectors, platforms are becoming key actors to intermediate the relationship between demand and supply. In some cases, they are the market, like the Amazon marketplace. So for firms using platforms to access the market, this means having opportunities to grow the customer base, to diversify it. At the same time, there are risks related to the detachment from customers, but more importantly for our way of reasoning is the possibility of having a kind of tech-economic dependency vis-a-vis platforms as it becomes a monopolist. But this is not the same across industries. We are, at least to a certain extent, evolutionary economists, and we know that heterogeneity matters, and in this case, industry-level heterogeneity matter a lot. To motivate what we do, we have to say that there are few studies addressing platform-related issues adopting a firm-level perspective, and this is also due to the fact that there are few data that allow to carry out this kind of analysis. As we have heard, and as perhaps you know, there are in the literature now rather many contributions addressing at the worker level the impact of digital platforms on wages, on employment. With Jacopo, we are working at the territorial level on the impact in the case of platform or Amazon, but you can think at similar analysis again at the territorial level. What are the theoretical premises for the analysis that we carry out here? Well, the idea, as I anticipated before, is the fact that there can be a relationship of dependency between the firm and the platform. Think of how customers are locked in platforms. Google, Netflix, Amazon, and as much as the customer base is large and locked in, and as much the other sides of the platforms, like firms, wanted to use that platform to sell their goods, may become more and more dependent on it. But there are other elements related to the fact that there are the digital components and the algorithms in particular that shape the relationship between the firm and the platform. And as we talked about ratings for workers, we have ratings and we have rankings on the platform websites also to select products and firms. These things are managed in an untransparent way by platforms and can determine a burden and growing uncertainty on firms. And then there is the rent extraction issue. As we know, and this is very much documented in the US case, how fees and commissions are growing more and more as a way of rent extraction by platforms. So our very research question is, to what extent such potential dependency and in general this asymmetry of power between platform and firms translate into organizational consequences which are relevant for labor. So basically we would like to understand to what extent such platformization of firms has an impact on workers, and in particular to what extent the pressure that platforms exert on firms translate into a reliance, a more intensive reliance on precarious work. Why? Because precarious work is cheaper and is more easily to get rid of. And so it can be a kind of defensive strategy by the firm, which, however, is a negative consequence for the labor force. Is this homogeneous across sector? We don't think so. Also because the degree of penetration and of market power of platforms across sector is quite heterogeneous. What we do is testing these research questions into peculiar sectors of the Italian economy, relying on a peculiar survey, which is the INAPP Digital Platform Survey. The sectors are the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry, two industries where digital platforms are significantly present, however, with heterogeneity. And we have many other variables and elements that we can control and account for, which are relevant to shape our relationship. So we have information on the kind of work that is employed by firms, and in particular, we are interested in the share of non-standard work over the workforce employed by that specific firm. We know if that firm relates to a digital platform to sell goods and services, which kind of platform, and what is the length of the relationship with the platform. Then we have plenty of firm-level control. Of course, it is important to understand how strong, which capabilities does the firm have, because this is important to characterize its reaction. Geographical controls, because as I said, there is an industry-level heterogeneity, but there's also a geographical-level heterogeneity, which is very important in the case of the platform economy. And then an indicator of market concentration, because again, how much strong and in control the platform is, this can have effect, of course, on labor too. Very fast on descriptive evidence. As you can see, the importance of platformization is not the same in the two sectors, and also across subsectors within the two macro industries that we are controlling. And not surprisingly, close to the 80% of hotels, Airbnbs, B&Bs, tourist villages, etc., are the subsectors where the penetration is more strong, while a significantly lower one and with heterogeneity can be detected in the restaurant industry. Even concerning the degree of concentration on the platform side, as you can see, you have a remarkable heterogeneity, and interestingly enough, we have a super concentrated market structure in the hotel and hospitality industry, with booking having by far the lion's share. The idea that as more important the intermediation of the platform is, the larger the share of fees, so rents transferred to platform, is quite confirmed by these kernel densities, so by these very preliminary descriptive inspection. And coming to our main outcome variable, we start finding some evidence, even from a descriptive point of view, about the fact that platformized firms in both hotels and restaurants tend to use relatively more intensively non-standard work as compared to the rest of the categories of contractual categories. So a few words on the econometric strategy. We try to control, of course, we don't have a longitudinal database, so we are limited concerning the techniques that we can use in order to account for the endogeneity problems and so forth. However, we rely, and we are still working on this paper, so there are some novelties that will come out in the working paper, hopefully out in 1 month or so. With an ECMA style, we try to control for selection. We replicate the estimation by industry. We control for specific platform to see if market power on the platform side has an impact. And then we take into account the length of the platform relationship, because we may assume that as longer the relationship with the platforms, as stronger the dependency could be. So let me show you the results and then I conclude. In the baseline model, where both industries are pulled together, we do find a positive and significant relationship, also controlling with the propensity score, with the share of non-standard work used by firms as compared to other firms in the same sector and subsector. Then we try to unpack the industry level heterogeneity that I mentioned before. before. And as expected, the stronger and more significant effect is found where in the hospitality industry, which in fact is the sector where you have a stronger penetration and a stronger market power of platforms of booking in particular. And in fact, when we distinguish by specific platforms, because fortunately enough in this survey we also know the names of the platforms with which corporations or firms interact. So as you can see, Booking and Glovo on the restaurant side tend to be the drivers as expected of the relationship. There is a confirmation of our expectations, in particular in the hospitality industries, concerning the length of the firm platform relationship and its impact on the share of non-standard work. So this is, I would say, the first attempt, and I don't think that there are empirical analyses of this kind around, also because this is a very unique kind of survey that also together with Valeria, Massimiliano De Ibbe, and other INAPP colleagues, we designed not just with this purpose, but this was one of the main purposes. So trying to capture this kind of dependency relationship and to see which are the potential implications. Of course, there are many other research questions like the impact on performance, on other organizational variables, and so on and so forth. But we think that this is a quite interesting contribution in the broad set of analysis that may help us to understand how this platform economy works, and in particular, how it is impacting the labor market. So thanks again to you all, to Valeria for all the organizational work that has done, and to all the others who joined presenting, I would say, very interesting and diverse research, which is what we should do on this issue. So thank you. I don't know, but if there is some not questions by the authors. If there are other questions, no. Lunch is a stronger priority, understandably. Okay.
By the way, we can discuss during the lunch. I hear some questions from
Grazie.
Thank you so much. To stop here for